Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Solo Q. I'm joined by guest Tony. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. Maybe we could ratchet up the difficulty a little bit. I don't know.
The
Maybe we'll talk about it.
life difficulty?
Maybe.
Maybe Final Fantasy XIV. Maybe it wasn't actually what was said, but we'll get into that just a bit. But before we begin, with all of our guests that we have on this show, can you give us a little bit of an introduction before we dive into our topic for this week?
Sure. So my name is Tony Garsow. I am the senior editor over at novacrystallis.com. And at that website, we cover a lot of Square Enix games, including Final Fantasy XIV. You've probably seen our live letter coverage early in the morning when the Final Fantasy XIV team runs them. We do live tweet sessions. So for people who are at work or they're sleeping or whatever else they may be doing, they have kind of a live thing going on. We also do summaries too. But our bread and butter is Square Enix stuff. That includes Final Fantasy Rebirth, Dragon Quest, pretty much everything Square.
Very awesome. And yes, Square Enix stuff. We seem to like that stuff around here generally.
Yeah, I think the Easy Allies community is pretty, for the most part. I'm sure they're cool Square stuff.
Yeah, I mean they
Digging Rebirth.
They don't always make winners, but yes, Rebirth. Yeah. We talked a lot about Rebirth. We're still not done with Rebirth because a lot of people are not done with Rebirth, so we wouldn't be able to do the spoiler mode discussion yet.
That's going to be sick. I'm looking forward to that.
But hopefully those will be coming in the near future. But we are here today to talk about some more Final Fantasy XIV, but this is going to be a little bit more broad. We're gonna talk about an interview that happened in Famitsu recently, and a statement that was originally translated to mean one thing, and then some people clarified that maybe it doesn't mean what we think. But regardless, we're gonna get into like what we think maybe could be more stressful in Final Fantasy XIV. And also, did some of this maybe stem from some other things, like perhaps some of the criticisms leveraged at Final Fantasy XVI and its difficulty, which CBU3 also handled that game as well as Final Fantasy XIV. So yes, there was, as I said, there was a interview in Famitsu in which Naoki Yoshida, basically, it was translated. I think the first time I saw it was on the 14 Reddit subreddit, where they said it was going to be that Yoshida regretted making Final Fantasy XIV less stress, or making it so stress free, and a lot of people ran with that, and the headlines and the videos that came out all basically said, "Oh, Naoki Yoshida is going to make 14 harder." So in Dawn Trail, we could all look at it forward to it being more difficult, and then the Final Fantasy XIV subreddits. Discord, the people who do the translations there stepped in and said there is actually no mention about changing the difficulty of the game. It was basically that they want to carefully change the like some parts of the game that are considered so stress free going forward. And if I got any of that a little wrong, Tony, feel free to correct me there. But that's kind of like where we stand right now, is that people ran with this early translation, and then now we're getting a little bit of course correction, right?
Right. So, I mean, because this game is, largely developed in Japan, a lot of information, the producer Naoki Yoshida does a lot of Japanese interviews and outlets over there. And because of the wonders of the internet, we can access these interviews, but it seems like, some people jump the gun a little bit, maybe use machine translations that aren't 100% correct. And I do want to give a quick shout out to the translation team for the subreddit for 14. They also usually are translating as well, and they do an incredible job. And I believe they released that image, that translated updated image. And props for them for getting that out and really kind of correcting some of the information out there. Sometimes with machine translations, you might get the parts of a sentence correct, but a lot of the intent and a lot of the nuance is lost. And so, I got a little bit frustrated seeing that myself, because, we could really, afford to give them a little pause to try to get a proper translation out, especially if they're going to be talking about this in the upcoming schedule, which they've got their own slate of events coming up. So,
Mm-hmm.
mhm.
Definitely. Now, I do think reason this, I mean, obviously, statements about difficulty would have gained traction, but I think it gained extra traction because I feel like there was a bit of copium for a subset of players out there that this fit their narrative about how in the last probably like 6 to 12 months we've seen a slew of videos and content creators come out and say like Endwalker was lacking in content, and also some subsets saying that like the content just was getting like too easy, and lamenting that there was like less challenge. So they took this as Naoki Yoshida saw this feedback, this wave of criticism, and their team was going to do something about it. Do you kind of like feel that that was maybe played a part in this as well? That this was fitting some people's narrative about the game's faults?
Oh, absolutely. I think there's been a lot of discussion about what is appropriate for Final Fantasy XIV's difficulty, because over the years we've seen the team really take they've spent a lot of money to really streamline the game. I mean, we've seen a lot of dungeons revamped for A Realm Reborn through Endwalker. That costs money. That's a lot of effort for them to do that, and really streamlining a lot of things to make it more amenable to single players and people who are new playing for the first time. Now, I think maybe a lot of people see that, and they've looked at some of those dungeon redesigns. They've looked at some of how the content is balanced, maybe feeling that some of the alliance raids are a little easier than they used to be. I think as the game ages, as we're now 10 years in, there's going to be a lot of people who have different levels of experience coming into this game. And the big question for Yoshida and his team is going to be, how do we keep this game friendly to new people and keep Camp B over here, our base here, satisfied?
Exactly. And yes, yeah, that's definitely been like a lot of the truths have been, there's a lot of truth to what some of that's been said, but also people don't always maybe consider like what you said about how much goes into streamlining the game. And we did get a new statement from Naoki Yoshida,
Yeah.
because it was asked at the North American Fan Fest. I was in the room when it was asked about a new starting point for the game. Would like 6.1 possibly be that, or 7.1, like something just for a new jumping in point? Because as if you're not familiar with Final Fantasy XIV structure, maybe you're new, that you either buy a jump skip or you have to play through the entire game like in linear fashion through the narrative, and that's their intent. But they reconfirmed recently that they don't have plans for a jump, a new starting point. So they're going to continue forward with the same format there. And I guess, yeah, do you like have any like thoughts? I don't think I've ever really, I don't know if we really talked about that in the past, but yeah,
Oh,
how
sure.
do you feel about the maintaining kind of like that's their vision? And do you think that that's wise, or do you think it's going to start becoming a little bit more abrasive with like potentially like new players, or do you think what they've
Mhm.
done has been enough?
Yeah, that's a great question, because when we patch 6.1 first came out, and maybe you noticed this as well. You noticed like, hey, they've got kind of like a lore dictionary that they're rolling out here. They've got it almost seems like that first cutscene could potentially be the start of something new. And it is, because like as we proceed into Dawn Trail, we are moving past the Zodiac Heidelin arc, and so I totally get why you would want to make a clean line there. Um, but I also think there are some realities with that, and that is, the Realm Reborn to Endwalker scenario is several hundred hours long, and I can see why they may not want to do it now. But I feel like it's a little bookmark that they could potentially open up later. There's obviously people jumping in right away, potentially at level 80 or 90 at patch 6.1. Obviously, people are concerned about that with how they perceive new players' ability to handle new things, and I think that plays into a larger conversation about the on ramp and the procession through these expansions. I still think that they could probably and maybe even should do it. I don't think that because I've been here since version 1.0 beta and subscribed through the whole thing and played it current. I don't think people's experience is going to be diminished by playing those retroactively. I think they'll get more out of it if they do after they play Dawn Trail. But yeah, it's been in many ways a very interesting conversation in the community about what does it mean to start people here from just a story and a gameplay sense.
Yeah, I two things I ask. One, very immediate, because when you brought up like that new thing in 6.1, do you expect them to maybe go harder and borrow maybe some of the active time lore system they brought in 16 and bringing that more into 14 potentially? Like something they can do is like a rework, like further rework on like the older expansions as well as going forward. Do you see them doing that, or do you think they're going to stick to doing their own thing in 14? That's the first thing I want to ask.
Sure. I guess my biggest question would be from like the engineering standpoint. How would you make the active time lore work within how Final Fantasy XIV works? I think it would be a really cool idea. Maybe not implement it exactly in the same way,
Yeah.
but make it more accessible. You know what I mean? So make it more accessible to people who may be jumping in. Then have like a little book they can open anytime. Make that accessible for them. I think that'll be useful.
Yeah, because they have the journal already in the game,
Yeah.
And like they can maybe expand upon that, so you don't have to like go to your inn or your house or whatever, and like go like look up cutscenes there, but maybe do something more with that possibly. But sorry, you were gonna say? Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure at some point someone is going to want to know like the basics of how like ether and crystals work. Like having a little notebook there will help. Obviously, they're not going to get 5 expansions worth of content there, but
Yeah.
but I think because A Realm Reborn through Endwalker is so strong, I do feel that people, if they're really excited about Dawn Trail, if they are really enjoying Dawn Trail, they'll be motivated to go back and play it in the chunks that you can, because you can save your progress and come back to current. Like I do think it's a great system. I guess it's a matter of do they do it now or do they do it later?
Mm-hmm. Okay. The other thing I want to ask, and this, so I'm just like thinking in my head right now about how they said that they're not currently planning a new like jump-in point for Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah.
This is like very hypothetical
Yeah.
before we dive into like really our main topic, but I couldn't resist asking this. Too tempting. Do you think maybe they made the decision internally that, this is a good idea for a new jumping point, but we're so far into 14 as is, maybe don't waste it here. What if we are developing another MMO for the future and it's related to 14 and we just make that the new jumping point? Like, why spend all this effort and like when we can convert people to a new MMO? Do you think they would ever deign to do something like that the jumping point would be, hey, there's a new MMORPG, a sequel to 14 coming at some point, but everyone's starting new there, and that will be like the cutoff point. Like you'll get like some bonus if you had a character in 14, but we're gonna make a clean cut there.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't doubt that they would try to incentivize 14 players jumping into a new MMO if hypothetically they were to make one. They are the team at Square Enix that probably does have the most experience making these kind of games. I think definitely for sure that'd be something they do. If they were doing it, they would probably have to start now. But we'll see what's in the pipeline for CPU 3. I think it's still pretty early yet to try to tell. But I think that with Final Fantasy XIV, I'm thinking back now, trying to remember the 1.0 days, and they definitely did have special items for Final Fantasy XI players who were subscribed as well. I think there were Final Fantasy 13. I think it's the Hermes shoes that are the 13 one, maybe. But yeah, I could definitely see them doing that. I don't know if I would put the pieces together and say that now they're going to start making or planning or building a new MMO because we're at this point in 14's story.
Mm-hmm. Sumo in our chat pointing out that this is what happened with PSO2 to Genesis when they started New Genesis. They did something similar with that, so it's not like unheard of. Also, with other MMO RPGs to kind of like do that clean break and reward existing players. But yeah,
Sure.
I the thing is, I feel like that's something they would not maybe do potentially because I feel like maybe they don't want like. I feel like they wouldn't make like a sequel to 14. I feel like they would just want to make something completely new. Given like everything that Naoki Yoshida said, I really like just his statements about Final Fantasy in general, like having a number at the end with 16 and wishing he didn't have to do that makes me really feel like they would want to do something brand new with a new, if they did a new MMORPG. But I also understand the reality is you need to have people playing that, and you have one of the largest player bases in 14. It would be like very unwise to not try and convert them, but like I don't think it needs to be done in the sense of like this is a follow-up to 14. It's like, but it's something new, you should just try it because we're making it, I think would be like the messaging rather than it trying to be a continuation.
Yeah. I mean, they tried a bit with that with 14 and 16. I know that Yoshida is probably like, hey, like the overlap here isn't exactly 1-to-1 here, since it's like you have an MMORPG over here, and then you have kind of a single player light action RPG, beat 'em up, whatever we want to ascribe to Final Fantasy 4 or 16. I think he knows that barrier is there, but I also believe Yoshida is on record saying that he thinks it would be wise to not operate more than one large scale MMO at the time, and I get that because, and you can kind of see that with how if you had been following some of the Xbox developments over the years, you probably know that like in their discussions with Microsoft, for example, that they wanted all of their players to be together. They don't want to be siloed off into little bucket communities. And I think that the Phantasy Star example is salient, but I think for Final Fantasy XIV, they are going to want to keep it as cohesive and together as possible, because I think that fits Yoshida's vision of getting everyone together, just like some of the conversation that we're going to have about some of the travel stuff as well. I think his idea of having the community as together as possible, trying to break down the barriers or to reduce the amount of barriers, is going to be healthy for the game long term. And I don't think that he would, as he said before, he wants 14 to be like a lifetime thing for him. We'll see how that goes, of course. But but I'm sure he's thinking about what he wants to do next, about what his division wants to do next. And I think that they'll want to preserve, especially since MMOs are quite profitable with a subscription. I think they're definitely going to want to keep 14 as intact as possible.
That's a real quick point I want to hit on. Definitely talked about it in the past, but the thing about 14 being so profitable, we were talking about people earlier who were painting like a narrative about the state of the game, and one of the things they like to put into that narrative is that the game is so profitable, but yet it's lacking in all this stuff. And then people saying, "Oh, it was because a lot of the team went to go develop Final Fantasy 16, so they were just lacking resources, so they didn't have the people. So Dawn Trail is obviously going to be, better because they're going to have more people." We've heard those points a lot, and I do want to like bring this up again, and I don't know if you like saw this as well, but because it came up with 16 versus Rebirth in terms of like budgets, because we talk about resources and like how the team's been, CBE3 has been putting resources into streamlining the experience from Aroma Born to Endwalker and to obviously to Dawn Trail. But in a building Final Fantasy 16 interview with Shuhei Yoshida on the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences, that was a mouthful, Naoki Yoshida explained that 16's budget was very small compared to Rebirth's budget. And we always just assume because 14 is just making so much money for Square Enix that equates to 14 as a massive budget, which I don't think is the case. I think they have a very strict budget they have to adhere to despite being so profitable. And I do think there maybe is a misconception there that they think that, oh, they have unlimited funds just to keep pumping in there. And I think they do have to pick and choose their battles.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? There's some things like you maybe have like heard about that as well, that like, would let you say you'd agree with that or not?
Mhm. So you bring up a lot of really interesting points, and I think it's very easy for people to be able to see that, hey, Final Fantasy XIV has gotten, remarkably bigger in the last several years. Of course, if I were Naoki Yoshida, I would not want to set my budget according to potentially some trends that have elapsed in the last year or two. I think that would be a little reckless. But if you've really kind of paid attention to, if you've been watching a lot of the FanFest panels and the live letters, as I have over the last 10, 11, 12 years, you really get the sense that Yoshida, he's come in and he is very skilled at blocking off the schedule. And I think I've told you, Damiani, when we've talked about this in the past before too, but I think Final Fantasy XIV's greatest strength is its schedule and being able to have a very predictable amount of content, more or less, with each patch is what allows people to be able to come and go as they please, knowing pretty much what they're going to get. With the expansions, I would say, with Dawn Trail coming up for you and I who have been playing Final Fantasy XIV for years, we probably have a general expectation of what we're going to get. I mean, we have an outline of all of the major content and so on. So I really think it's a mistake for people to try to intertwine a budget based on the performance of a game, and I see it too. I see stuff like, well, you know, this game is making so much money with cash shop stuff. Why don't we have Hrothgar hats? And Hrothgar, like, I really wish you would get your hats. I'm excited for the day that hopefully you get more, but obviously, because a game is making more income doesn't mean that they can go right away and just hire more um, animation riggers and all of the people that they need to be able to handle that. And one quick thing too is, like, if you hire a person to do that, let's say you have to hire maybe one or two positions to do that. Well, when you finish all of the Hrothgar hats, what do? Can you move those two people back into the team and be able to, are you overstaffed for that area and so on and so forth? Um, if for people who are planning, they would then try to, find a way for maybe some other animation projects and so on. But, these are also like salaries that you have to keep going. So when you're planning a budget, you have to think about the people too. Like, we don't want to just overhire and blow up the team just because, a lot of people have subbed for who knows how long in the last year because of some other things in the ether that have gone on.
Yeah, and honestly, they so yeah, I definitely see they get a lot of criticism sometimes, the developers as well. I like there's a phrase I hate that people use as a criticism. Like, it's shorthand. I know they don't always literally mean this, but like the lazy dev argument, like, oh, and there's also the meme one, like small indie company. Whenever like something that someone comes across in 14, like, why is it this way? And I think some of the reason people get like that is because they just don't know enough about what's going on behind the scenes. So they get like, they just assume this is the way it is. And I understand a little bit of why they think that way too, because a lot of games, especially PC games, you see modders step in to do things that the developer won't do themselves. As recently as Persona 3 Reload, modders are working on the female main character, the female protagonist, adding it into the game because Atlas is, the Persona team is not doing it themselves. It's not part of that. So when your average consumer gamer sees that, they're like, well, fans can just do that. Modding community can do this. That means they're not professionals. Shouldn't the company, the developer, be able to do that with like the funds they have? They're just not doing it. And that's why I think they draw that lazy dev argument from. It's like, wow, they just don't want to do it. I mean, yeah. Have you seen that? Is that like kind of like been your thoughts, or do you have something else you want to like share maybe about
Oh,
that? Yeah, because I think this is like gonna be the last thing we're gonna talk about before we dive into like making 14 more stressful or less stressful. Our actual topic for today. Sorry.
Yeah, and this is especially common throughout, not even just 14, but many games in general. Look, I I, I think it's absolutely okay for people to make the criticism of, or to just simply state what they want for the game, and that's fine. Like if you do that in the official forums, there, like Final Fantasy XIV has a community management team that part of their job is to collect that feedback and to move that on up so that people who pull the levers of power, they can make the decision about how can we fit this in the schedule, who do we need to put on it, how much money do we need to put on it, what kind of impact does this have on our other plans, creatively or time wise and so on. And so community managers are skilled at kind of prying the information out of the BS, if you know what I mean. Um, and I think, yeah, it really does speak to a level of, you know, um, I wish, even on game companies would be more transparent about how they develop games. I think the 14 team is very good about putting a lot of information about out there about like how we actually do this. But at the there's a lack of understanding from like the player level or consumer level, or what do you want to phrase it that way. But I think there is a system in place for people to, within the 14 team, to pull what they need out of it. Like for example, like why don't they simply make another ultimate instead of making another island sanctuary or something like that? And community man and the team, like obviously that speaks to a level of misunderstanding about how game development actually works. But again, the team can probably look at that. I would hope so by now, and I'm sure that they do. But they would just note that, hey, like here's a person who really wants another ultimate. They could probably divest the rest of that. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And sorry, in chat while you're saying that, Sumo pointed made a statement about how generally money doesn't go back into divisions; it goes to the company. Which I mean, he got me thinking. Like, I believe that's actually like generally the case for a lot of developers and their publishers as well. And I think
yeah,
it's true of Square Enix. So I mean, even though Naoki Yoshida sits on some, he is executive level and sits on some like boards, it's ultimately not up to him in a lot of these cases. Like he has an input, but there are definitely people above him. We say at every fan fest, when the Square Enix CEO comes out, as recently, as the more recent fan fest with the Kashi Kiryu coming out, and now you see the demeanor, like he has to be, that's his boss. Yeah. And they call the shots. And I mean, you can go to Square Enix's page and take a look. It's publicly available information. Take a look at their executive team and see who all the people are above them. Like they, like any business, they have like chief
yeah,
legal officer, chief information officer, chief accounting officer. So like they have finance people there. They, as we said, they make these budgets, and just because your team or your game makes X amount of dollars, that dollars is not going right back into your division. It's going to the company, and the company then decides in the coming fiscal year how those profits and their budget will be allotted. I mean that's how a business works. So it's not just, if it was just like CVU3 and they were by themselves and Naoki Yoshida was the like head of the company, sure, maybe, and it was just Final Fantasy 14, sure, maybe it would be that way, but it's not that way. And I
yeah,
think that's another thing people don't always fully realize is that Naoki Yoshida does not call the shots all the time, especially when it comes probably to like the budget. But I do think he carries a good amount of weight, and I'm sure he makes very good arguments. And but as you said, he is very good as a project manager in keeping the schedule. I mean, a
mhm,
very rigorous schedule that's very demanding, and we've seen them adjust it because they've seen how like the staff have not quite had experienced burnout, but we're getting felt like maybe it was a little too much when we saw like the patch cycle get like pushed out a little bit further than what it used to be.
yeah, yeah. And Sumo, that is a really good point. I would also, because since you brought this up, Damiani, as well, is I would actually go and look at their briefings as well. They sometimes do take a little bit longer to translate them, especially lately. But when there's a lot of chatter about like how does the company see how Final Fantasy 16 performed? You can go and take a look at and see how do they, with these briefings, you can look at that too. Now, the reporting that has come out about it is also, up to task as well. But if this is an area that you're interested in, if you're like, well, how does Square Enix really kind of, how are they putting out there how they want people to, or at least their investors to view their progress? I would definitely check out those reports as well.
Yeah.
Interesting reading. I'll just say that.
I was definitely following those more closely when I was tracking when it was not Forspoken, when we still didn't know what Luminous, like its project, where it was, and we still had like only a project name. I was like definitely like going through a lot of that stuff. So they definitely give it. I know another big one everyone loves to do is like Nintendo. They give like their financials, but they're also not quite as transparent, I think, as someone like Square Enix. But yeah, if you're interested in that, definitely like go check that stuff out. I do want to, so I want to talk about a little bit about, the concept of Final Fantasy XIV. Too stressful, not stressful enough. I just want to say this is an MMORPG. MMORPGs are just inherently a kind of a big time sink, time investment. So the concept of making them more stressful to me was like, wait, what? You're like, because I'm thinking of that from a surface level, from like the barrier to entry for new players, for casual players. It seemed like that seems like not a great idea. This isn't a single player solo game like a FromSoft game where it's like, sure, let's make it as difficult to play because people like that challenge. And this actually, I'm conflating two different things here. There's both like, the kind of like the logistical hurdles of getting involved, just like the structural things of a multiplayer live service game versus a single player offline game. That's one whole thing. And then there's like the content thing. And I think most people that we've seen lately are talking about like the content point of view. So I think most people would agree, don't make 14 more complicated to get into. We're going to kind of like covered all that with what we just talked about, but we're going to talk about like the content end right now. And that's where I think there's a bit of, a divide in some sections of the community about what needs to be more difficult or what could use tweaking. And again, I still think my thing, like, this is a game you have to mostly play with other people, so you got to keep that in mind. And yeah, I guess like let's start there. Is there like, do you think that like there's content in this game that how do you feel about like the content in this game in terms of like the stressfulness of it or the difficulty? Like, what are your thoughts on it right now?
Sure. So, kind of full disclosure is I don't do too much rating anymore. So if anyone wants to pull my logs and check me, like, I'm not doing Ultimate, I'm not doing Savage currently. I've got a lot going on, but I do play the game pretty much every day casually, minus say a teensy rebirth vacation. As someone who's played since 1.0, and there are a couple things that go through my mind in that there are things that I think, for me personally speaking, just for myself, is like, it would be nice if the Alliance raid was just a bit harder. You know what I mean? I really do think that the point that people bring up about the Stormblood Ivalice raid, Return to Ivalice, is that it kind of really hit like a perfect spot where it, like, everyone felt challenged for a bit. And then I think with this latest raid, the Miz of the Realm, the first raid was pretty promising, and then it got somewhat easier as time went on. I think so. For the type of endgame that Final Fantasy XIV has, they definitely want to provide content that's giving you like a little step ladder to get to more difficult content. And I think what the community does sometimes is they're not so much concerned that the base level content is too easy. It's that is the game preparing you for the harder challenges, right? And we've seen that a lot about we've seen that in discussions about, well, what's going on with like the frequency with which actions are learned from level 1 to level 90. A lot of people are like, it's too spaced out. Like, people don't get their full kits before they they're playing with an incomplete kit up until what, level 80 or so, or parts of a kit. Those are all really great discussions that I actually don't have an answer to. It's like, how do you prep people for harder content in the game? How do you on ramp that with all of the content? It's a hard question, I think, because if you make that too hard, risk people falling off that ramp. Or if you make it too easy, you set them up for endgame without enough game knowledge. One thing I do really want to get in real quickly, though, is that people really should start just having a little bit more empathy for people who are starting the game recently. Back when I started the first Quail, way back, like right after A Realm Reborn launched, we were all pretty rough. We had a very, very limited understanding of like how mechanics in the game worked. And to be fair, that first raid was a little bit interesting. Maybe those who have done the third Sonic Rings level of the first Coil of Bahamut remember, the team was figuring out how to design raids too, especially with Twintania and how that kind of elapsed from day one to, I mean, wasn't it that it was pretty much unbeatable for the first? It's been a long time.
Yeah, there's something about like the snapshotting for twisters. Like it was just like
Yeah.
it was like luck if you got past. I mean, they took it off. They took it down to fix it. So
Yeah.
it was in their eyes, it was broken and
Yeah.
not beatable because it was specifically because of twisters. Twisters didn't work correctly.
Yeah, I really think they made a good decision about, and I know that opinions vary on this, but I do believe it was a good decision to, for people who want the story of the raids to have a certain difficulty that isn't going to break their back trying to execute it. Um, I still can't believe that they put a full cinematic cutscene
Oh yeah,
after 11 or
turn
12.
12,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There's always an extra one, T3 again.
Yep.
But that was insane. Like, but at the same time, it's also like, this is the team also like learning with a real trial by fire, like how to design a raid. And as time has gone on, they've probably seen the metrics about who, like they can see who's completing and who's not. And I think that really led them to a decision to split that from just one level from, Coil into like a normal and a savage mode. So I guess, to kind of wind around and answer your question, it's complicated. It really is complicated. And what sort of tools you put in, there could always be more tools. You could put many, many tools in the game itself to kind of teach people how to play their class better. Ultimately, though, people are going to come back and forth to the game, so they may forget some of the techniques that they've learned. I really think, as much as maybe people will be abrasive to this suggestion, but really, like, if you see people who are struggling, be that person that respectfully reaches out.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to be said about how the community can build a better ecosystem for itself, meeting maybe the developers a third of the way there or something like that, making these requests to maybe build some of these functions that players want, to build better skills. But be nice to people. People are learning. People don't have 10 years of experience playing the game than I do.
Yeah, I do think that's hard for some people to like. It just flies over their head because it's easy to just not be aware sometimes that they're just always new players, and But there also is an issue I think with communication in the game. I mean, they're just like there's a stigma sometimes against people like talking in game about people spread misinformation about how you say anything or you get like banned and stuff like that, and it just doesn't paint a great picture sometimes. And then there's like stories about like the novice network, and they have the tools in place, but sometimes they have been misused or abused, and there's also people just feel intimidated to use them. So there's a little bit
Yeah.
of like that there. I guess it's kind of like there is some accusations around it, like 14 has gone less social over time as well, which is a
Yeah.
whole different topic. And then that brings up people who talk about like, 11 and having those rose tinted glasses about 11's days. Like, oh yeah,
Hmm.
like you had to like talk to everyone to do anything in the game. And it's like,
Yeah, there's no drawbacks to that.
yeah, no drawbacks whatsoever to that. But like getting to like the point about like what content you did, like I do want to like just before I talk about alliance raids, because I do agree with you there. Before I forget, yeah, I remember your point about starting off. In the early days, yeah, I remember like first core raid, I got asked to try turn two was the first thing I ever tried, and just like the concept of like mechanics, like passing the Allegan rot thing, I was like, what? Like we're gonna stand in a line. I'm like, okay. When like I didn't even know to look at buffs and debuffs. That's like how bad, like in like game knowledge wise, I was. I was like, wait, there's a debuff bar. I mean, I saw those icons, but you really have to pay attention to that. I was like, oh, okay.
Mm,
And it has a countdown number. I was like, oh, okay, I get this. So yeah, it's like learning process and growing pains. Also,
hmm.
like the old like, and I think this also plays into like why people want like maybe some more difficult or stressful content. Desmond Darkhold and Aurum Vale, like back in the day, and even uh Demon Wall with the
The
Hornets or
bees.
whatever.
Yep.
Yes, the bees. It's like we had stuff like that where people like would wipe on that a lot. Like Aurum Vale, it's like the first room. It's like this is like a landmine.
I will say, I will say, Orem Vale. So I have kind of a hot take here. I think Orem Vale maybe is less hard than Desmond Darkhold, and I'll say this because there are people that do know how to do that room because they go slow and they're a little careful. But literally every group that I go with, that one hill where you have knockback AoEs and
Yep.
you get knocked off a cliff and get pounced on by a frog. I mean, every time, even vets, even some people who should know better, every time.
Yeah, I truly believe deep down in my heart that was where golf got invented in Final Fantasy
Yep.
XIV. People saw that happen in that dungeon, and then they were like, "Wait, you can knock things off edges? Wait a second, hmm."
Mm.
But yeah, these were stressful situations, and I was like, "Oh gosh," you would like time out or get frustrated, and you really, other than like a few other times, like outside of high end content in the regular story content, you really didn't come across that too often going forward. I would say like the alliance raids were kind of like the last bastion for that. If you didn't want to go like anything that's like extreme trial or higher is should have some like level expectation that's challenging. But anything below that, I feel like has just become kind of automatic. It's part of your dailies, your weeklies. It should be
Mm.
something you're just logging in. And I think that part of that mentality might have come from as we've seen actual live service games evolve in the past like just few years. It's about keeping people engaged and not necessarily people are thinking about making it like, oh, you don't want to make it too difficult because you don't want people to like bounce on you. This is like the core content. And so we've seen that go away. Even these older dungeons have been radically like nerfed into the ground, both through like the changes we talked about earlier about streamlining. That meant some of the Realm Reborn dungeons and onward got overhauled, and also like the bosses got changed. And it's just, and we had like the stat squish, so they gave us all like buffs in some of this content just to like be at level or like stronger than before. And so the threat isn't there anymore in a lot of this old content. So there's not even a way to really experience that anymore. And so I do see something like the yearning for that. So I just want to like share that, I do remember the times. It was a combination of being new. So like what we're talking about, be kind to new people because to them it's not as simple and easy and straightforward. And two, yeah, there was a time when things were a little bit more challenging in general, I feel, for lower level content. And it would be nice to have like one of those back, like maybe every expansion.
Mm.
But we do have content that has tried to tackle that. So like alliance raids, real quick. You talked about how Return to Evil East was kind of like that really good spot where people had some difficulty. Also remember the what was it? The dungeon with Ozma, Weeping City of Mock, right?
Yeah.
That's Ozma. Like Ozma, it was just like hello,
Oh yeah.
people getting that like screwed up on that. I was like, oh god, like here we
See,
go.
it's Ozma, and then I think Dun. I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, but Dun Skaith.
Hmm.
The first fight on the airship.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
with that, yeah, that you can get knocked off and like, oh, you didn't make like the ice things or what? Oh yeah,
Oh
that
god.
was the
And
thing. But also, I will want just to defend where we are now.
yeah.
We hadn't seen some of those mechanics before. Now they're so commonplace. It's like, oh, we don't like even bat an eyelash at that because it's like, oh. But when we see a new mechanic, we're like, wait, what is this? How do we do
Yeah.
this? But like, there's so much more communication outside of the game and information, like repositories of information, that those things get solved so quickly that the common player base, I think, the information disseminates down to them that it's not such a mystery or enigma for as long as it
Mhm.
used to be, even like 10 years ago. So yeah,
Yeah.
the Alliance raids, like I felt like they were, they were doing a pretty good job. And I do think even with the near ones, they had a good amount of challenge in those as well. But the most recent one, the Mist of the Realm, while it's beautiful, great music, very nice to like look at, it was very. It got, as you said,
Mhm.
they got easier with each one, and I was kind of like scratching my head. I was like, wait a second, these usually get like harder or something. Like that's how content works in this game. It usually gets harder as you go along. So I think even if they were going to do that, maybe if they, do you think it would have helped if they changed direction and started with the easiest one and built up to the hardest one, or do you think that really would have mattered? And yeah, I do you think like as you said, like do you want to double down and say you hope Dawn Trail's Alliance raids are a step up in difficulty?
Yeah, so it's a lot of things really. And again, really for you and I who have played this game for upwards of a decade, like we have like a built-in kind of like understanding of how fights are kind of designed in the game. And back in like the Heavensward era, we didn't have that as much built-in knowledge. And so I think that partly has to do with why the Alliance raids back then are regarded with as much reverence as they are now. Um, and the current raid, I like I mean, all of it's great. But I think when it comes to you know um, really kind of engaging your mind at a certain level, and again, like this is different for a lot of people, which is playing into like why this is actually more difficult than I think people give them credit for, is that essentially you do have to make it difficult for people who've been playing this game religiously for 10 years and people who maybe started 10 days ago or 10 months ago. um yeah, I hope Don Trail's Alliance raid content is a bit more punishing. But a lot of people speak to this, and I'm sure you'll agree that like there really is nothing like that first week experience where no one knows what to do. That is the
Yep.
closest thing that you will get to like that A Realm Reborn era level. No one knows what the heck they're doing, kind of deal. And so, maybe seeing more new types of content being introduced there, new types of mechanics being introduced there, and then ramping them up for when you like a normal raid where you've seen it before, but you've got to execute more on your rotation and your DPS and so on.
Hmm.
It's challenging.
I also think like the nature of our next Alliance raid in Dawn Trail could like be perfect fit for bumping up that challenge, considering what it's going to be.
Yeah,
Echoes of Vana'diel, so Final Fantasy XI stuff. Maybe they make it a little bit more like,
maybe
yeah.
maybe they have to make you bark in chat to join a group, and you can't join through the
That
party
okay,
fight.
that would actually be funny if they're like, you must go to this spot and you must form a party of like not 24, but like you have to form a party of 8 before you could queue. I mean, we used to have that at 14, but they made you go to
Yeah,
that. You can only queue in from that spot. See how long that lasts before
yeah,
people are
yeah.
like, no,
And
I just want to queue from, I want to do my crafting and gathering while I'm queued. Why? Why do I have to wait here and do nothing? It's like,
yeah, enjoy your hour-long queue for level 15 dungeon.
yeah, so obviously I think Alliance Raids is a great spot for them to kind of like, push the ceiling a little bit higher again from how far it has fallen. And I think that'll make some people happy. What we were I shared some like anecdotes, but like, the base level dungeons, the MSQ dungeons. Like MSQ dungeons, and then also we have extra dungeons that we get. Do you think there's a don't we're not talking about Criterion or variant yet, but like just like traditional dungeons. Do you think there's a way for them to like maybe rekindle that, the style that we had in the past, like Orin Vale, Desmil Darkhold, anything like that, where they could put in like weird mechanics and make it a little bit confusing, challenging? Or do you think they'll never really try that again? And this is something you want to see, even.
Sure. I mean, if there were no limitations on what I could do, I would say I would keep two parties happy. The first one would be the people who want to do it with the AI party members. Make it, keep doing it the same way that they're doing it now. Because they also have that mechanic and they also have that content in there where you level them up independently. Keep it simple for them, for people who want to engage with that. But I will say it's like, people have the option now of choosing between having the AI help them out and then going in with a party of other people. And I think that if you're going to choose to go in with other people, you probably are going to be a bit more amenable to more of a challenge, right? So obviously, it requires more balancing, meaning more work, meaning more time. But if those weren't any, obstacles, it would be cool to see like you have the dungeon, you have the AI version, and then you have one that's a bit harder in the vein of those older dungeons. Stone Vigil comes to mind as well. Um,
Yeah, I I get, yeah, and I think like the natural answer that people like, watching or something, or say like, well, they did an evolution of this. That's why I wanted to stick to like traditional dungeons, because
yeah.
we did get variant and criterion dungeons. They are
Mhm.
going to continue. They're going to keep going. They've been very routinely adding these.
Yeah.
Variant dungeon, is a nice concept. Like these branching path dungeons, which you have to go back and replay through all the damn paths to get a mount. I do think like, and they can be done solo too. So they check off everything. You can do them by themselves. You can do them with other people. And then if you want a challenge, you can do the Criterion version, which is a set path, which has bosses that have very difficult mechanics, I would
Mhm.
say. More challenging than probably like extreme trials. And then you have this, you have like the most difficult version of them. And it's basically the same thing. It's just that the trash mobs in between are more lethal, and everything this has more HP and does more damage. Mechanic wise, it's identical to the base Criterion version. So they did put out this, new dungeon system that I think is like a nice evolution. And I guess my question is like, how much of that have you really tried? What do you like? Maybe want to see them change about it? Like, do you think like the variant is too easy, and maybe that can even use a bump? And from what, I
Mhm.
don't think you've probably done the hardest ones, but like, do you like? I mean, do you wish there was like an in between like the hardest and like the lowest level? Like, how, yeah, where do you
Mhm.
stand on all that? Yeah.
So, big picture, I think the variant and Criterion dungeons have had kind of a mix of responses, positive and negative, I think. And I think what people should probably keep in mind is that really we've gotten our first iteration of them trying to think about content in this way. And much like how we had, if you remember the original Diadem, then Eureka, then Bosia. It's a process where they have learned to refine the content even further, and people seem to be pretty happy with Bosia. I do think there is a configuration of the variant and Criterion dungeons that is going to make people happy, and it's probably going to take a little time for them to suss it out. And the feedback that I think that they got from variant and Criterion is going to be instructive of how they handle it in Dawn Trail and going forward. I think they're cool. I think the variant dungeons, even playing them solo like I've done before, I think they're just neat to explore and just kind of get something where you're traveling around with an NPC or getting a little more bits of the lore. I think the encounters are kind of cool. Um, I mean, it provides. I actually don't want to say that they're actually easy. The variant dungeons. I think for some people at certain skill levels, it's very easy. But going through them like the first couple times, trying to find the different paths and so on, I'd say they're pretty cool. Um, so Criterion, I think, is where if you are going to make a harder difficulty version of this, you really have to gear it towards people who are more committed on the game in general, who are spending that time to learn savage fights, to learn ultimates, for example. And so I think that really needs to hit with that crowd a bit more than this has. I don't know what changes or design considerations need to be made, but I think they want to be able to put that harder difficulty style content in front of the same people and say, here's more for you to do. Here's more in, the content library that we have that is up your alley.
Okay. Yeah. That's a good point about variant starting there. About maybe they like don't need to be more like, difficult than they are because of what they present to you. And obviously I do know, like, even I'm guilty of this. Like, I wait a bit, I wait for all like the paths to be figured out, and I just like open that like image guide. I'm like, all right, I just want to get my mount. I mean, I do like there's like the 3 paths you can choose, and there's 4 variations of each of those paths that you have to figure out. So for a total of like, it's 12, right? 12 paths, I think, or is it
10 to 12, I think.
Yeah. And that's like, it is fun to see one of those first. I do like one each without looking anything up. I'm like, okay. And then like, how do I do the other to like 9 now? And because I want to get that mount. One thing, I don't know if this is a good idea, but one thing I was considering is that I like them conceptually. I like this idea of making it intriguing to come back to a dungeon and get a different experience, the replayability of it. Because I'm going to apply this to traditional dungeons, because that's one of the things I hate the most about Final Fantasy XIV nowadays is I don't want to grind dungeons. I avoid it at all costs because it's like the least interesting content to me at this point. We've been doing it from day one, and I just don't care to do it anymore. I'm like, maybe newer players are like, I love this, but for veterans, like a veteran like me, I just am tired of it. I don't want to go back. I don't do DREX unless it's like, I'm in a static and we need to get tomes like for like week 1 or whatever. But like, other than that, I'm like, once that hurdle is done, I'm like, I'm not doing dungeons anymore. I'll do the new dungeon once and then I'm done. But variant provides an incentive. So I was wondering if there's a way they could integrate variant dungeons into the MSQ, and then like the weekly your duty roulette, your daily roulettes for like your expert dungeons or whatever. And I know that people are like, well, then how do you choose a path? What if the first time through it is just a MSQ crit path, one of the story path through it? And you could redo it that way if you want. But once you've completed the story version of that dungeon, it now unlocks, like, it is now variant. It's classified as a variant. It has like multiple paths now. And every time you go through it, you can go through a different way. And it has those checkboxes, and it gives you maybe extra like rewards, like a mount or something, and do that. So I would like to see it, the variant level, be done like that. I would like to see variants happen on like each patch as part of the MSQ. I don't know if that sounds good to you, or if you want to point out some obvious flaws with that, but what do you think?
I think that I'm someone who avoids EXDR if they absolutely have to. So on trains, you'll see me there no matter what. For people who do like EXDR though, I would say it'd be great if you could get a bit more variety in there. And why not have a version of the variant dungeon that is that single path, or one single path multiple? Why not have that built into the EXDR selection? I think that's a great idea, Damiani, and I think it would serve to, I think, really, because the variant dungeons themselves are story oriented, having them part of the MSQ, I think, would also be a good opportunity to present story content people to story minded people.
Mm-hmm. The other part of this is that I think Criterion should be split off. It could still be the same dungeon, but I do think they should serve a different purpose than what they do now. Because these always drop mid-patch. Like, they're not at the beginning of the patch, right? They're like a little bit after, usually. Like the 0.5 of each patch. So like 6.25, 6.3, like, etc. I want variant to come out on main patch, and then Criterion to follow later.
Yeah.
Criterion, I feel like they should do some. I'd personally like to see some tweaking in that. Savage is, still gonna be like hard as hell, But I think Criterion should come down a little bit, and I think it's all about like the rewards and a little bit of the structure. I do think Criterion has the opportunity to serve as those battlefield operation dungeon type environments. They really have similar things with like the res restrictions and the limitations the actions can bring in. But like when I were like Baldessian Arsenal and like all the other ones I'm forgetting right now, LL whatever. I can't remember the full names. I could like look them up real quick. But yeah, like they've done these in like Eureka and Bosia, and we've had these dungeons to have like a normal version, and then like they have a harder version, like DRS, like with Delibrum Reginae, and that was intriguing. And then you have like the harder version. And I would like to see them do it here because those you have to go through field operations to do, and you can queue them separately. But like BA you can't. You have to do a whole process. I think Criterion could serve that. Like they could expand upon Criterion, juggle the difficulty a little bit, and make it be more about like environmental hazards, not just like the mobs hit so hard. It's like there you got to like use your lost actions to like suss out some like landmines and stuff like that, or debuff fields, and make it more of like an adventure and an excursion, and not just like about like raw challenge of like I gotta learn mechanics, I gotta deal with these mobs and pull it quickly. It's all of that and dealing with that. And I would like to see that put there because I love like BA and DR and Delibrum Reginae are like I love them. I love that stuff. I want more of that, and they're also like large scale. That's the other thing. These are meant to be 4-person, so I'd like smaller scale versions of those. That's the other big point. So you don't need to get 48 people or 24 people, whatever the number is, to go do that stuff. It's like you just need 4 people, and you can do a smaller version of that. So I would like to see those adjusted and maybe have those features worked in so we get more of those. The other thing is the reward structure. We've heard so much about how Criterion and its Savage counterpart do not give you good enough rewards. We got the update to Savage, but like I still don't think like it's good enough. I would honestly love to see regular Criterion reward you with the upgrade mats because it comes so late. It comes halfway into the patch, so you're several months, like you're 2 months into the raid cycle that they come out, or you're well after if it's in the odd patches. So it's like help people catch up more easily, especially as we're getting way more jobs added, the new jobs coming in Dawn Trail. Make it easier for people to be able to gear up. And I understand they can't give you all the gear because they want you to do like Savage raids and do Alliance raids, but give us another opportunity to get like an upgrade mat and maybe other right side options, because we used to have more options for right side than just we had before. And then for the Savage version, like get a title, but like give glowy weapons, like an ultimate. If it's ultimate difficulty, give us cool glowy weapons. That would incentivize. I'd absolutely incentivize people to go get it. So you don't have to do a regular ultimate anymore. You can now do this. It's still challenging, but shiny weapons. Everyone loves the shiny weapons. I don't know.
And as we've been talking these last couple rounds here, it really does feel like. And a lot of people, I think, are looking at the upcoming Dawn Trail slate, and they're seeing a lot of the similar things that we've gotten before. And I think what Yoshida and his team are going to really need to do is, I think all of the building blocks, all of the content that they have made, I think all of the building blocks present there, and even adding a little more if they have the budget and scope to do so, I think that's fine. But I think what the community is trying to look for now is like different configurations of that can really meet a couple needs. And one is perhaps a little bit of a more elegant upgrade process through the patches. You and me have talked about some of the different potential ways that they could, do we even have to have the same upgrade process that we've had for the last couple expansions? Could they rethink that entirely? It doesn't sound like they are, but it's really food for thought, I think, about like how to maintain interest in the game, Dawn Trail and later, because for sure, I think the things that we're suggesting could work. Obviously, it still takes extra time, effort, and all the things that entails. But I think that it's going to go further than maybe they realize.
Oh yeah, I know it's like a hot topic about like gearing and like the character like gear progression and making it more streamlined. Obviously, I will always say Savage should always be rewarded first. You clear Savage is the fastest way to get your gear like immediate. Like there needs to be that prestige and that reward for a certain window of time. Savage needs to be the priority and the way to get like the easiest way. Not, I mean, the fastest way. Obviously, don't make it easier, but that needs to be the priority. However, after a certain point, and not so close to the next patch, there needs to be something that accelerates that. And like, I'm all for these ideas that like we just talked about to speed up that process because we have so many damn jobs. And like, I feel like as a developer, you want people to try out as many jobs. I mean, I get maybe they're just happy, like, oh, find your favorite job, stick with it. But I don't play a lot of jobs. I only play healers at this point. Like I don't play this expansion. I've not played any other jobs because I'm like, there's just too much to do at this point to like get them geared and stuff. Like I'm just staying with my healers. Like screw this. Like it's so much work. Like even like you're having me say like no, I'm done. Like I used to like at least do a raid every raid tier with like other like a DPS or a tank. It's like no more. Like it's getting out of hand.
Yeah.
They need like, and I hate to say this, like at a certain point it needs to become easier and like streamlined. And yes, like what we talked about with like maybe Criterion could be the answer, but also they have systems in place right now that would be perfect to keep people engaged in the game and let you do all kinds of content. The Moogle Tome system and the Series Pass and PvP, two ongoing reward systems that encourage you to the Mogpedia version that we just got is like, oh god, like that's like great too. Those two systems where you're like doing weeklies, dailies that funnel into a unique currency that can be, they can use that to spend on gear. It's like, it's well after tome gear, it's well after Savage. So it's like, this is a catch-up mechanic. And also to gear alt jobs, I really wish they would take a look at those two reward systems and apply that to PvE, like the PvE structure, and allow you to buy like gear that way. That like allows you to like be at like max eye level or close to it. It's like this, like, I feel like the answer is like that's the answer. It's right there. Because then people can like do a certain amount of dungeons every week, or go play PvP, or go do alliance raids, or whatever, turning crafting stuff. It's like all this funnels into, at a certain point, this funnels into allowing you to catch up with all your jobs and their gearing. And it's like, this is brilliant. But they don't do it because I think they're worried that this will, cut off people from other content, but you're not, because this is telling you to do all whatever content you want. And they're like, oh, this might hurt the raiding scene. Like if you give another option besides raiding to get gear, but like this is so past the point. Like I'm not like the odd expansion. So like 7.0 drops, we get our new Savage raid. It's like once 7.1 comes around, unleash these like ongoing, like, I mean, they're not battle passes, but like these ongoing reward systems that let you like, they help you work towards getting gear. So you can get tome gear, you can go do Savage if you want, or just, story trial or story raids, and you can do this system. It's just like another system to help you get gear. And if you threw Criterion on top of that, where you also have another way, it's like 4 different ways to get like gear and stuff that would, and upgrade mats. I see a lot of people being happy with that, honestly. So if you're talking about like stressfulness and like, balancing, like this is one of the things I personally wish they would like look at more closely, the development team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think you and me have even talked about the scratch card that you get for PvP seasons. Why not make a PvE iteration of that it doesn't go away basically, but like you could use it as something that kind of is onboarding you towards the type of content that the player base wants a bigger pool for. I think a lot of people, whether it's justified or not, they want more people to be in the same pool that they are for endgame, especially for maybe extreme and Savage content. And I think finding a way to kind of simplify it and streamline without touching the content itself would be a smart idea. Again, I think they have all of the building blocks for all of the endgame content and post-patch content. They have them there, but really taking a moment to step back and reconfigure how it all fits together to serve people who are playing every day, who aren't just kind of coming back for the story. Again, that's totally fine. But really reconfiguring it in a way that works better for people who are logging in every day and doing that content.
Yeah. No, obviously we're talking about like improving like the gearing and progression experience.
Yeah.
I realize we haven't actually touched on like the like we're talking about trials right now. Sorry, raids. We're talking about raids right now. Both the story, Savage, and then like some other adjacent content. But even like let's like just the story raids right now. The ones that everyone does for the story. Difficulty wise, are you like satisfied with where they're at? Do you think they need any like would you like to see them any more challenging, or do you think they're pretty good because they're also like a weekly thing that people have to do over and over again?
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, and so I think they're okay where they're at. They really shouldn't exceed a certain threshold because again, you have generally two big groups of people who are jumping into these. One, it is people who are doing it for the first time who want to experience the story and watch the cutscenes, and two is people who are going in there to get a certain amount of tomes to get a certain drop. And when you mush those two motivations together, it does cause a little bit of friction. And so that's why I think that the level of difficulty there has to be, it can't be too high
Yeah,
just because of the different motivations.
I would agree with you. I think they're fine where they are. Like especially like week one, we're talking about Lions, right? Like jumping in there right away. It's like fun to figure out those mechanics, and it's like they're enjoyable to do. And I think they are like the step right below like extreme trials. Like if you want something that has like a little bit more bite, you go to extreme trials. And so I honestly think they're fine where they are. They don't need to be more challenging. The one thing I could see maybe using a slight bump in difficulty, although I could see where there may be some pushback. The final trial of every MSQ, like the main story. So Endsinger, Shinryu, like those type encounters. Do you think they should have any kind of like adjustment, or do you think like I'm assuming to remember people having some trouble initially with Shinryu, but then in like it didn't seem like it was very much like an issue after that. But otherwise, yeah, I'm not sure if those need to like they're like a final boss. Is it more about the spectacle, or do they need to be more challenging? And do you see any obvious like pitfalls that they ever tried to make those a little bit more difficult?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that brings up a little happy memory because after the 6.0 Endwalker expansion launched, of course, there's the final MSQ trial, which is a huge spectacle and is really amazing. I think one thing I did that I have never done before is, and I've done it from time to time, but for this one I did it a lot, is I would go back in and just help people through it. I would help people through it, and it's exhilarating. Now, as we've gotten like further along the patch cycle, people have geared up quite a bit, potentially a little too much because now what I'm hearing is that it's even if you're maybe helping one person through, you can I guess skip some of the dialogue after a certain because it
Oh,
goes so fast. And I think
oh,
it's not so much adjusting it maybe at the time, but I think they need to be a little bit more nimble with preventing that because if like for everyone who's done that fight and you want to get through all of the lines, I mean, for story purposes, you want to experience that.
yeah, it's interesting because they did account for this in old content. In
Yeah,
a Realm Reborn in Ultima, it has force hard locks. It gates you
yeah.
from going too far into the boss fight at a certain point, and it lets things play out. Now,
Mm,
obviously, if you're like, I just want to get this done, it's frustrating. But for a new player experience, it's like, oh, there is no way I will be able to miss any of the dialogue from this fight
mm,
because it won't progress past a certain point
yeah.
until the dialogue plays out. And I wonder when that happened. Maybe that happened after they were done with Endwalker content. That or I don't know the timing of it because we don't know about that detail behind the scenes. But I wonder if they're gonna maybe consider doing that on going forward for like Endwalker, and even like Shadowbringers, and
Mm.
have those fights have hard locked points where it's like the dialogue needs to play out before you can
Yeah.
advance. So yeah, I do wonder if they're gonna do that.
Yeah. Spurtfire in chat brings up that they put in an eye level sync. They did do that to try to fix that. I think I would like a little bit more attention for them to maybe do that a little bit sooner. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I think not to bring it around again, but it would really be great for people to. Speaking of two motivations, Circus Tower.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, people use that a lot to level, but there is a generation. It feels like there is a generation of Final Fantasy XIV fans that has not seen the platforms of the Glacia levels.
Oh
And
yeah.
I mean, see, and even I'm torn. It's like, yeah, it would be cool for people to see that, but it's also like I really do want to, just level one of the 20 jobs that we've got.
Here you go, Tony.
Hmm.
I'm surprised they haven't. They do okay. They do have a reward for this, but it's not always as. I think it needs to be
Yeah,
more stated. Minimum eye level. So
yeah,
you can go through all this content and minimum eye level. And honestly, minimum eye level isn't always the answer because even at minimum eye level, some things aren't quite as challenging as they used to be because of all the job balancing. So like you're never gonna get the authentic on patch release experience of like any of this content ever again.
but it's not a
As
face roll.
but yes, so minimum eye level, but the incentive to do that. So for example, if you do minimum eye level extreme trials, you're guaranteed like drops. Certain drops will always happen when you do the minimum eye level, I believe. I don't know if they've changed that since, but it used to be like, or an equestrian roll will always drop if you do that. Or, I mean, it's
Hmm.
not mounts, but like, I think certain items will always drop if you do, or have an increased chance. I feel like if they had something more concrete for minimum eye level, so like Circus Tower, you do it minimum eye level, maybe you're getting double tomes or something, or 1.5 tomes if you do it that way for your reward. So it's like, or something that like scales that like it becomes more of an incentive to do it. Like if you have the people who are willing to do it, it's worth it. Like they need to make it
Hmm.
worth it over just doing the face roll version of it. Now, obviously, if you're going for like relic, I need the relic stuff for the relic. I need tomes for relic or light or whatever step, something. Sure, you want the face roll version. But if they could provide something meaningful through that, like maybe new achievements that, hey, you do this, 1,000 minimum eye level runs, you get a mount or like stuff like they just need to find a way to incentivize that because I think minimum eye level would help alleviate some of that. But also, that's also like user decision. So I do think like in a case of like the final trial of the MSQ, the devs do need to step in probably and implement minimum eye level restriction
Hmm.
right away, not wait for people are face rolling this. Let's be like more proactive than reactive, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah, that would be good. And there's something you've also been kind of hinting at, or we've been talking around a little bit too, and that is, you know, sure, it's great to do something to want to do the content like I do, but a lot of people that I know who also play the game are like, well, it would be great if they had more and better rewards. And I think that's kind of a refrain that you're seeing a bit more often, especially when it came to like the variant and criterion dungeons. I think some of the rewards may have been a little underwhelming, or you know didn't fit quite exactly. And I think you know I think the content that 14's got is for the most part pretty good. But I think if they can really try to incentivize some better better rewards, or different types of rewards, I think that people
Oh,
would be more motivated as well. See, you're smiling and you've got that one thing that you want.
I just thought of it, and I think that's genius. Anyone who's Square Enix ever listens to this, here if you can apply this to whatever reward system you want, it'll be one of your most popular rewards ever. So whatever content you're using this on, make sure you really want people to engage in it. Have a reward system where whatever it is you're doing unlocks the ability, and you have to do it per job. You unlock the ability to equip to break the job restriction on gear, so that like I did enough of this, I can spend my currency or I hit the achievement. I can now unlock paladin gear on any job as glamour. I can glamour paladin gear to any job or dancer, and each job requires a certain threshold or achievement to be hit, and then you could you can start glamoring gear from any job, cross job glamoring. And it's like, but
Yeah.
you gotta unlock each job. You gotta unlock each job. So you gotta work towards it. So it's something to work towards. And
Mhm.
now, no matter what job, you can have like your glamour across all the jobs easily. Like I glamour end game right there. There you
Oh
go.
yeah. See,
Just
like
among.
my glamour motivation is actually pretty basic, where it's like I actually will get the designed job gear for each job, and I'm one of the people who's leveling every job to cap, so I'm hardcore in that way. But it's something that I've done for every expansion because I think like the default job gear looks really cool. If there was something to maybe, I don't know, make like a slightly tweaked, cooler version of that, maybe I would, because they've done that before. Like it's been a while, but like a slightly fancier version of the initial.
Yeah, I just want to be able to mix and match some pieces that are job locked, and it's like that would look good. I like that look. I want to have that look, but like, oh, but the AF gear on this job doesn't like looks like this. I'm like, no, I want that piece, but it's only for that job. And it's
Mhm.
like, I really want
Well,
that.
you heard how hard people cheered when they talked
Yep.
about die slots. So I think glamour is the path to enlightenment for this team. I think you know, as they say, glamour is the true end game, and I think really putting that first and foremost will excite a lot of people too.
Yeah.
Obviously, other rewards too. People get really excited about mounts, and mounts are really cool.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
the obvious like mounts and minions are definitely it. Obviously, like we've had it in like ultimates give you glowy weapons. We had PV, PvP top 100 introduced a thing you can get that adds glowy effect to the PvP weapons. Like glowy effects. I mean, the last field operations we had glowy looking, or was it Eureka? Which one had the glowy gear? Like and then we had like the raids gave you like flame effects. Like adding effects to your
Something.
gear is a very popular thing as well. Like just adding glowiness or particle effects or something to your gear and weapons is a very popular reward. And if there was a way to obtain that other than like extremely difficult content, people would be pretty on board with that, and you could get people to like, grind that, that gear over and over again for sure.
If
Um,
you clear ultimate, they give you a house, no matter what.
that would, oh man, well, that would just encourage people to sell more runs and
So
buy more
like
runs. But like,
you know, if you clear ultimate, you get to kick someone out of their house and take it.
oh man, you're trying to make this game a drama
I'm
game,
trying to
then,
kill
huh?
Final Fantasy XIV.
Yeah.
Like
How do we speed run destroying Final Fantasy 14? What are like the ideas? It's like Yoshi P's like, I'm done. I want to destroy this game. All right, let's brainstorm. That should be the next episode. I did mention
absolutely.
quick field operations, and we got to mention that battle content like this is most likely making a return in Dawn Trail after its absence in Endwalker. First of all, like, did you like Eureka? Did you like Bozia? Like, or what elements of it did you like? Are you excited for it to come back? And this is, I like, honestly, do you think this is the content that maybe is what people have been yearning for, both because it's like a little more stressful to do, but also the big one, it's community content you have to do with lots of other people.
Yeah, I think those are definitely exciting things about the field operations content. Yeah, I still have pictures. I've got screenshots somewhere, and I'll tweet them in a bit. Um, but the dinosaur from Diadem up on the island, you remember? So I mean,
Mm.
and it really was like a weird like experimental system for there. So correct me if I'm wrong, but like the gear that would drop from it had like randomized stats, so it was almost like
Yep.
D I forgive me for lack of a better term, but like Diablo-ish. And so like if you wanted like the best stats, if you wanted like the best stats for a piece of equipment, you had to just grind and grind and grind. So obviously obviously that system was not popular, and it was iterated into Eureka, and Eureka was really fun. I was kind of a sicko for Eureka. The one thing I do regret though is I did not finish Baldessian. So that is on my bucket list
Mm.
for actually doing. I had some stuff kind of going on at the time. I couldn't devote enough time to actually doing it, but I do have the like, and there are discords that are still in this to this day running BA, and I'm actually going to try to block off some time to do it. Eureka was awesome. I laughed my head off when people would get stomped on by that dragon, the dragons that were placed around what was it, Pagos, the ice one, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the snow one.
Mm-hmm.
I thought they were interesting, and again, they felt like communal content. Everyone was communally suffering, which which to some extent made it attractive as something to do when you weren't doing like the other type of content that was in the game.
It served as so many purposes. It allowed, I mean, it was community content, it was rewarding content. Not all of it was a winner, obviously. Like there definitely were some low points, but also it served as alternative leveling means. Like Eureka, especially Bozio was the popular one of the popular like alt leveling. Still is for a certain
Mhm.
like level when you hit a certain level threshold. Um, and it would be nice to have that come back. I do think like yeah, like the first Eureka was fun. It was so different and unique, and like, having to deal with like the elemental wheel, learning how to do that, and getting all these new abilities. Like oh, we have like, these extra abilities, and like the like how like leveling down though, not like
Yeah, yeah.
what is this crap? Get this out of here. I was like I hate leveling. I'm like the thing about it was like the danger of losing, and I think Bozia solved that by giving you a currency that you were like trying to increase to like level up like certain like your like healing, defensive, and your DPS and defensive stuff. And it was also currency you're trying to like spend on other things. So like I think that was more like I don't want to be gated by loss of progression in terms of like I can't even do this content. But like the rewards, it's like sure you suffer if you lose, you suffer. The rewards. The rewards are gonna be like further out. So I want to be able to don't penalize participation and lock you out of participation. It should be like the rewards, just like a little bit more of a struggle to get. And I think that's where Bozia nailed it, and Eureka kind of like stumbled
Mhm.
because it was trying to emulate Final Fantasy XI a little bit. Also, like Pagos I know you probably liked it, but man, that was a brutal time. And it was because I didn't know like the light at the end of the tunnel. Like all this for a relic, man. It was like I do think introducing like a BA at that point, like we had got 2 of those style of dungeons because we got like multiple in Bozia. It's like if they had just introduced something in Pagos like that, oh man, story would have been so much different for Pagos if we were all working towards like this cool dungeon to do, and then we got another one in Hydatos. And honestly, yeah, like it was fun to do, and I'm glad something like it's coming back because I now looked this up. We had
See,
go ahead.
I know you're a healer, so I know that part of
Oh.
it was also rescuing people who, because if you were to, I think if you released, you would level down or lose experience points, and so for a lot of healers, and I'm not a healer. I'm tank brain, I'm DPS brain, but healing I struggle with a little bit. But for me though, to be someone's hero and just go out and rescue them in Eureka, it was a really cool experience, and I think a lot of healers really liked that level of risk that and the communal, even if it was communal suffering, being able to go out into these zones and being able to save people as well. That was fun. The critical engagements for Bozia, we had a lot of fun with, and communal suffering with Red Chocobo. Boy, when you get it down though, you feel great when you get that Red Chocobo.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's great.
Also, you talked about earlier helping people, and
Mhm.
once like what that was a thing because it's a bit of a grind. Like I understand some people don't like having to do so much grinding to get to certain rewards, and they felt like this maybe was a little overwhelming. But for people who did like to go in and was or grinding out a lot of things for the rewards or the gear progression, whatever the relic, multiple relics, sorry, going like the red chocobo, it's like I know how to do this. I'm like I can do this easily. I'm gonna try and help some other people out. So like constantly raising people, like, getting people up, like you know, preemptively doing stuff like I think they're gonna fail this. I'm gonna try and mitigate this. So it was actually fun to like it was part of the challenge too. It was like an extra challenge of like how many people can I help live through this or get up in time. And so
Yeah.
and it feed into like the communal aspect about it. And I kind of really appreciated that. So yeah, like that whole system I think fed into itself really well. And also like the duels. I mean, there are a lot of issues with how to get into them and the restrictiveness of them, but like conceptually pretty cool. And honestly, some of the most like fun content. And it was stress. You want stress level? That was probably the most stressful content because you on your own 1v1 with like a boss level thing where like you die, it's over, and people get to watch you. They get to like just circle around you and like you're getting
Yeah.
spectated on. It's like you're not in an instant. I mean, you're in an instance with a
Yeah.
lot of other people, but like you're not in your own private instance. It's like, oh
It
boy,
is.
you're being
Yeah.
judged.
It was a really cool idea. For me personally, if I saw you fighting 1v1 in one of these duels, I would be there cheering for you because I'm a nice guy. Unfortunately, in an online game, not everyone is so nice, and so I get that people would avoid them for the performance anxiety, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I would love to see what the next iteration of that idea is for sure.
Yeah, I could see like maybe they decide to like you get warped to like a spot where you just go 1v1. Maybe they just give you the option. Like you could choose to do it by yourself in private and it'll just take you to an instance.
Rescue
Or
me.
or if you do it in front of people, because everyone got a buff if you won. It's like, oh, like this is awesome if you won. So you can maybe like choose. I think giving more options is always a good idea. Obviously, creating another instance within an instance could, I don't know how like taxing that's going to be on their resources, but it seems like it probably should be doable. But if anything, like keep refining the process to engage in them so that it's not such a barrier to try them. They added that like reputation system so that you got like every time you got passed over, you got a +1. And so the people, the highest numbers were like the first to be selected. That was a good first step. I think increasing the frequency of the things that just increasing their frequency, however you're going to do it, make
Yeah.
them happen more often so people aren't waiting as long. But anyway, yeah, like Bozia like had a lot of good stuff to it. And I think with some refinements, hopefully they can introduce a system in Dawn Trail that will like check a lot of boxes for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And can't wait to see it come back. But that's what I forgot. Duels were kind of the evolution of the final part of the emergency missions in Diadem,
Mhm.
that craziness there, and all this to get like a weapon with RNG stats that would probably be like, it's like, oh man,
Mhm.
that was extreme. That was definitely
Yep.
extreme. So, but yeah, hopefully that comes back, and that would definitely help. Um, with a lot of the issues some people have been having with the game. The
Yeah.
other thing, oh, sorry, do you have any final thoughts before move
just
on?
to bring up something real quickly in that really reinforcing the ways that people can experience the communal content, like yeah, keep the duels, but then maybe reconfigure them so that maybe there's like a notoriety stat. If you have low notoriety or something like that, you can call on people to help you out. But if you are like, I want to solo this guy, I want to solo him, her, if you're one of those people and it's like you can do it, you should get like a little notoriety buff or something like that to reward people for different ways that they want to approach it. That's going to be interesting to see. Something that's kind of a spitball for that kind of, you know,
What
iterating
if
it.
what if people? So there was the metal currency.
Yeah.
Someone pointed out. Sorry, that Eleanola pointed out in chat that's what you lost when you died, and then
Mhm.
like if you released, you lost way more of it. Anyway, than taking a raise. What if you could spend some of that to like do a care drop into like a duel? Like, oh, like I don't think they have like the right lost action. Like, I can spend some of my metal to give you it right now. So
Yeah.
like,
That's a great idea. I love that.
so that like if people can like spend stuff that they want to like make it easier
Yeah.
for you, that could be
Yeah.
like we're gonna spend it. That would be kind of like nice. Yeah, I would like to see something like that. The other big piece of content that I think got a lot of criticism for maybe not providing enough challenge, and it's a piece of content I think people expected a little bit of a challenge from, was this expansion's iteration of the Deep Dungeon. We got Eureka Orthos, and from all accounts, from everyone who has done it, from people who have soloed it to people done with the group, it is it's different. It is ultimately the easiest iteration of the three of the deep dungeons currently, and that it just didn't provide anything really uniquely new that I think some of the people who really enjoy deep dungeon content were really looking forward to seeing if they would push some boundaries, and they
Mhm.
kind of didn't. And I wonder if that's an area they're gonna like maybe try and remedy in Dawn Trail, or if you feel like they get stick to course. And also, like, have you really done a lot of deep dungeon yourself? And if not, what would maybe get you to jump into it if you haven't?
Yeah, so I think it is a cool type of content, obviously, and I'm so sorry that I'm forgetting their name, but there was the recent person who did I think it was a GDQ that they did a solo run through
Oh,
it.
Angelus Demonus.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
That stuff's cool. For me personally, I do the story part of it, and then I haven't done much more of it. Usually what I'll do is I'll do what is required for like the relic or whatever carrot on a stick there. I'd like to be able to do more of that content, but it also seems like looking at some of the stuff they have brought up for the Dawn Trail schedule is that they're not quite committed to the deep dungeon yet.
Hmm.
So I guess for people who are, and I guess to clarify, they said something like deep dungeon. Maybe we're not sure yet. I think maybe a larger scale rethink of that content, maybe configured in a different way, is in store, because I think people like the core concept of that content. But yeah,
Yeah. I do feel like, because the explosion of both roguelike and roguelites in recent years, that there's a lot more potential, I feel like, with Deep Dungeon. I feel like there is a way to make it not something that people keep coming back to, especially if they go the roguelite option, where you're working towards like having, things that carry over between playthroughs. Obviously, you have like the armor and the weapon and the armor, the offensive and defensive stat that you're increasing with like the blue chests that will increase that, but you cap at 99. But like everything else you get, I mean, you bring back potsherds or whatever that you spend on items, but your oh my gosh, the pomanders, you don't bring those between runs. They're just like, you don't, it doesn't go any deeper than that. And it kind of feels a little surface level. So it'd be nice to see them maybe work on a system that maybe there's something like that. They could go that angle, but they could also like just look at like even like variant dungeon, like narratively. Yes, these are random floor levels, but like, what if there were like choices at certain parts, and like you go like there's like so many different ideas I could do. Like the choice part like is leading to like what Hades did. Like Hades had like, you even when you get to the end of Hades, like you find out that's like not the end and there's more to do, and it's like, oh wow, like there's a whole thing about why I'm replaying this all the time. And like even like modifiers, like having a modifier system where people who really want the challenge, like the people who like the solo deep dungeon specialists, here's a way for you guys to make it even harder if you want a harder challenge. Like here are all these modifiers. Like there's so much that's been thrown out there that like when I like did Orthos and looked at them, like they really like that was like, I'm not hugely into deep dungeon, but it did seem like it wasn't very impressive
balanced
with
very well either. Yeah,
yeah, I don't know if I can speak to that as much. I'm only really done Palace of the Dead and Heaven on High. I haven't even done Eureka Orthos to the end. I felt so like not really incentivized to do it. I'm like, this is just so much, feels so similar. I was hoping that they were going to do something a little bit more unique with it. And yeah, again, I think it's a place they really could. They want to put the resources into it. I think it could be something really special if they wanted to do that. But it's obviously where they want to put their priorities. If it would take away for something like the field operations, I feel like that's like a way higher priority. It's like, yes, let's get the next field operations like is whatever you need to do to make it as awesome as possible. Start like do that first. And
yeah,
maybe some of the concepts that would make Deep Dungeon better could be like applied to that, because there are some similarities between the not the structure per se, but the systems that you're utilizing, because they have
hmm,
these unique systems. Like you have pomanders, you have lost actions, res restrictions, you die, it's over. It's like there's stuff like that, like the cost of like even resing, like what does it cost to you, and then like a progression, it's independent progression systems. Like they do share some of that similar, and also both of them were good ways to level alts. So when in
yeah,
Shadowbringers, everyone's like, "Where's our deep dungeon to level our alts up?" It's not there anymore. It's like, yeah,
yeah. I think Damiani that like a configuration of deep dungeon that works like a roguelite, even if we can just conjure Hades for a moment. If they did that, I would simply never log off. I think that would be a great direction to go in, and then obviously give it its like FF14, the trappings of it. But that would be very cool. Like imagine a new deep dungeon in the vein of Hades that is taking place in the live stream. Imagine that.
That would be pretty awesome.
Uh, just spitballing some ideas. But I think yeah, I think there, like I've mentioned, is that there's a lot of room for them to take the building block and do something interesting with
Yes.
that.
And before I get, I just remembered, like, we're also talking about Hades. I can remember the boons. Like, after you complete a certain amount of floors, you get to pick like a boon or something. So like you get some kind of like special buff. And so like you basically are choosing you on top of your like your basic rotation. You have like a build. You can like basically picking buffs to make a specific build to give yourself a better chance. Like that's what I was forgetting. Like that's the
Yeah.
stuff. And as Eleanola pointed out in chat, like they said, like maybe different rotations or spell speeds could be interesting. What you reminded me of is the Battle Royale Blue Mage thing that got dropped. That's where it could go into Deep Dungeon. They want to do Blue Mage Deep Dungeon, having to acquire your skills and stuff on top of that. So, like, what do you prioritize for your skills to get through? Like, I want to fight this enemy so that, yeah, then now we have Beastmaster coming. Yep, here you go. This is like one way they could really kind of like evolve and build upon what they've already done, the foundation, by working in other contemporaries
Yeah.
like ideas. And like there's I feel like there's a lot of potential there. It's just what I saw in Eureka Orthos and then like watching these streamers do it, and like they love it, but like they're pointing out it's nothing really special. I'm like, man, like so it's something I could skip over this time, like because I'm becoming more picky with my time in 14. And I was like, I'll try it. I'll do like the base level, like the 20, 30 floors or whatever. And then I'm just going to move on. Like I just wanted to try it and
Yeah.
move on.
So I've got a super quick question for you, and maybe chat can help us out too. But what would Emmett Selk's boon be?
Oh, if he gave you a boon like in
Yeah.
Hades, oh, he gives you, okay. So he gives you an emo, he gives you like a, charm increase. Like, so charm. So like enemies, like they're delayed in attacking you. So you because they're so charmed by your presence.
Hmm.
So it gives you a little bit of like a way to like not like sneaking by, but there's a chance they'll look at you and like they'll be like, oh, I'm charmed by you. So like they'll leave you alone, or maybe they'll join up with you because they got that charisma. You know, they make people want to join them.
Yeah, I can't do it. The Emmett snap. He would come in. He would do the snap, and he would just like obliterate everything.
That would be
So
a really good one shot instead of like
yeah.
bringing out like the summons to do that. It's like it's just Emerson comes
Props
out.
to Ninja Kitty Meow for thinking about that one, or you know, summoning it in my brain.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I mentioned Blue Mage. We have Beastmaster coming. The last piece, like really, like I think significant content that could honestly use, that could provide something more of a challenge. Because Blue Mage has its own independent leveling system. This is a collection of spells. We expect something similar to happen with Beastmaster. We have the Mass Carnival, which has its own set of challenges, which are very solo-oriented challenges as well.
Mm-hmm.
If you're looking for like the evolution of the duel, that's kind of what Mass Carnival became with its like the final challenges, especially with like the hidden achievement challenges for those as well. Those are really fun to do. I would say it's unfortunate how I think like they're locked behind this. They're locked behind a limited role job instead of, every job could have like instead of having like the novice hall and guildhest or yeah, guildhest guildhest leave quests are the turn in thing. Guildhest, the ones you have to do like level 1 through 40, they're not even required anymore. Instead of ditch those systems and bring in like the equivalent of Mass Carnival for each job, where you have to like you can demonstrate mastery of your job as you go through like these different challenges and get like cool rewards for that. I feel like that might be, some. But anyway, yeah, Beastmaster, that's coming down the line, and like Blue Mage. Do you think there's anything more they could really be doing to this? We don't really need to like get into. I mean, share your thoughts. I don't want to restrict you.
Sure. So yeah, I mean, like it would be cool. just to the Blue Mage Battle Royale thing is like so silly, and I just want them to do it. Like some of these some of these systems that are not as demanding as rating, that require certain things. I think it would be really cool if they just, in some of these other types of content, really let the game get a little crazy, just like it does in field operations. Like you can get some really broken combinations of abilities in there, and I think that's okay for this little bubble of content. I think if you want to put in the effort to break the game, like maybe a single player Final Fantasy VIII kind of a thing, I think that would be really cool. Um, but yeah, Beastmaster, I have no idea like what they might be doing with that. It would be cool though, and I've seen some people bring this up too, is that if they are going to do Beastmaster in like a similar limited job fashion, is that they should allow Blue Mage to participate in that content as well. Don't
Yes.
don't silo off Beastmaster and Blue Mage.
Yes.
Like they need to be
Please.
together, I think. Yeah.
Like that is the probably the most frustrating thing is that they are excluded from so much content. Um, but yeah, at the very base level, they need to be able to interact with each other in content. So I can queue into stuff. It's like usually something that required you to be all Blue Mage. It's like if you have Beastmaster and Blue Mage mixed together, they can queue in together. But like they can't queue up in Duty Finder for rant like solo, but together as a preform, they can go in, or they can queue in together. I think that's a must have. I will be very disappointed if that is not the case. And honestly, like I'm always a proponent of like give us more of what you already have, give us more options. If you want to like restrict rewards, so be it, or give us different rewards so that you've preserved the integrity of the example is like why Blue Mage can't do ultimates. It's like they were worried about like I guess the integrity of the achievement. It's like, well, then give it a blue specific achievement. Just give it
Yeah.
like the blue legend, the blue ultimate, whatever, however you want to do that. And then they get like the Blue Mage ultimate version. They only get to get a token for that.
Yeah.
They can't get any other ultimate weapon. It's just the Blue Mage ultimate weapon. And it's like, that's fine.
Oof.
And like Duty Finder, it's like, sure. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like maybe that's going too far, but it's like I really wish they could just queue into like content and like maybe it's like certain actions are locked out. Like your book, your skill set, you can only pick from this. Like maybe pick a certain like range of skills, and those are the only ones you can use if you're going to queue in with other normal players.
Yeah.
Like I kind of wish they would do something like that so that they weren't so restricted. But I don't think they're really ever going to go that direction. But at least like Palace of the Deep Dungeon, there should be a Blue Mage version of Deep Dungeon, Blue Mage version of Ultimate. There should be a Blue Mage version of PvP where you can queue in as Blue Mages and stuff like this. Like let chaos like reign, but like
Yeah.
you can keep
If they
it
even
separate
want to
too.
gate it too, like if like they've done with Blue Mage content so far, and really like it has me thinking back to like what does it really hurt if like Blue Mage wants to do like the Stormblood ultimate? Like it's not going to hurt anything, guys. Like we can relax a little bit. Like no one's no one's going for world first Stormblood ultimate anymore. So
Yeah, as pointed out in chat, like we had a group clear UCOB with the Bahamut Rage active, which should like not be possible, which gives them like 5x damage buff. Then someone just did it with one neural link. And it's like, wait, so I don't know if you've ever seen videos of UCOB, but like these purple orbs that like go, or the green orbs, sorry, that go around and you have to like stand in a neural link to hit them or it wipes everyone. It's like you're supposed to have 3 of those. I mean, someone did it with 2 like a few years ago, but now someone did it with 1. It's like there are people already not cheesing, but it's a lot of skill, a lot of creativity. But it's like if you can execute this on there, like let Blue Mage go in. Like I mean, even if like it's not possible, Blue Mage, like let the community like let's test that.
I want to see it. I want to see
challenge. Like let the community say challenge accepted. Let them try Blue Mage on content you think is impossible to clear, and let them see if it's doable or not. And I, honestly, like, yeah, if you're really worried that like, it's gonna be too easy with Blue Mage, so it's like everyone's gonna go Blue Mage. There's gonna be a guide how to clear these ultimates with Blue Mage. Everyone's gonna get their tokens even easier than before. I mean, older ultimates are already kind of by proxy or easier because of various factors as time progresses. And That's why people, if you're looking for another idea for content that people have been like clamoring for, Unreal versions of Savage and Ultimate have been like tossed around by a lot of like the rating community to give that so that they can preserve the difficulty of older Ultimates and Savages, because even at level, because of like various factors, they're not as hard as they used to be, and they never will be in the current system. Anyway, yeah, I wish they could like give us more options to do a lot of this stuff, and it would be fun to see these challenges being like it's another good idea for like the community team, even the developers. I mean, I guess the community team doesn't have the final say, but like the development team be like, hey, you want help increasing player engagement? Maybe for Dawn Trail, issuing a challenge. Hey, we're going to let blue mages into old ultimates. We don't think it's doable. Let us see who's the first, race to world first for blue mage clearing these impossible ultimates that it couldn't be done or whatever. The ones they think can't be done. And let's see if it can be done. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of cool to have like a developer get on that level of engagement. Now, obviously, there have been issues in the past with certain things and acknowledging world first races and stuff, but just issuing the challenge, I think, is fine and harmless. Like, we want to see if this is even possible? Just like do that, yeah.
It's like chat says, let them cook.
Oh god, was I another one who was telling you this? Who did I tell recently that I have an irrational hate of that phrase right now?
Oh,
like,
really? Yeah, it is.
Let us cook and let them cook. I like am tired. I want that phrase to like just die off now. Like,
yeah, it's quite overused, but
I can't look anywhere without seeing it. I'm like, all right, enough. This is like Nickelback in the radio in the 90s or something. Like, please stop. it's so
we just need to bring Nickelback back.
Yes, the bring. Yeah, Huber does it a lot too. Yes, Sarah Knight. Huber absolutely does use it a lot, and I mean, yeah. The last thing with difficulty, real quick, we've gone through like most every piece of like relevant content. I will say, like for Savages, Ultimates, even EX Trials, that's something they really don't need to get any harder, honestly. Like their normal adjusting within the margins, I think is fine right now. The whole discussion of ultimate difficulty with like the two current ultimates versus like the design of the past, it's a whole different topic we don't need to get into here. But
yeah, it's beyond my level of understanding.
For all intents, yes. For all intents and purposes, though, they are challenging content, and they probably don't need to get radically harder or radically easier. I think they're within a nice like sphere, and they're fine. Especially, I also give a shout out to EX Trials, even though I don't do them as much anymore. Like I do them like week 1, clear them, move on. The rapid fire nature of the mechanics in Endwalker's versions, nice touch. Like pushing people out of their comfort zones to deal with like higher level style of mechanics. I usually only see like an ultimate or even like the higher floors of Savage, where just tons of mechanics are being overlapping at once, and there's no real like you don't have a lot of downtime. It's like, oh god, I'm constantly moving. Like Barbaricia was like the first example of that this tier, and I was like, oh nice, like, and people noticed it and they appreciate it. Now maybe some of the later ones didn't follow suit, but we had a few examples where they gave us a little bit of a taste of that. So I'm very happy. And obviously the Criterion Dungeon versions of the bosses giving like such mechanics heavy fights. Very nice to see that. Difficulty though.
Oh yeah, they're fun.
Difficulty. This discussion of difficulty, we already clarified that the initial translations might have jumped the gun, but the one other part about this, why I think people are so easy to latch on to the believability that Naoki Yoshida might consider making 14 more difficult. Obviously, we talked about the 14 criticisms. We also haven't talked a little bit about Final Fantasy XVI real quick. Now, CBU 3 and helmed by Naoki Yoshida, they took over Final Fantasy XVI's development, and the game came out. There were some polarizing aspects about it. The action versus turn-based, was it really even an RPG? Like, we're not getting into any of that. But one criticism that I think did ring true for a lot of people is that maybe the difficulty wasn't handled as well as it should have been, and that the base game was base difficulty was a little too easy, and that they locked the harder difficulty behind having to complete the game. And so there were some criticisms leveraged about Final Fantasy XVI being too easy, not difficult enough. Michael Huber goes out of his way to say it's like one of the easiest games he's ever played in his life. He loves saying that all the time. So do you think maybe Naoki Yoshida and his team took some of those criticisms to heart? And do you think they're going to take? Sorry, do you think they'll take any of that to heart? And do you think maybe that influenced him in saying what he actually did say about the nature of Final Fantasy XIV? Or do you think they're two independent things that don't have any bearing on each other?
Oh, I'm sure that they cross pollinate in different ways. I think the biggest bellwether, to see if he has taken some of the 16 criticism to heart is to look at this upcoming DLC, The Rising Tide. Although it is a different lead that's on that project. It is the Dissidia guy who's Kujiroka, I believe. He's directing that. But I would assume that if that is something that the 16 team in general has taken to heart, that's probably something that they will consider for that DLC. I will say though, so it's been interesting to kind of track to see who has thought 16 was a little too easy and who people maybe thought that was a little too challenging. Me, I don't play fighting games. I don't play a lot of action games. I play some. Now, even on the normal mode of Final Fantasy 16, I maybe have had a few game overs, but other people I've known who have played fighting games thought this game is swish, too easy. Give me hard mode. Give me whatever's after that. Putting that up at the front, I think, would really even the demo that they released, maybe give like a hard mode version of that to let people really gauge like what their skills are. And so if that was available from the front, I think that would have you know let people, because people didn't have any experience with the game. Like they've had experience with maybe Devil May Cry, which is in the vein of this, but for people who don't have familiarity with that series, give people the tools to kind of assess early what their skills are. Maybe do like the first one or two chapters, and the game maybe suggests, hey, like we notice you're killing it. Like you basically juggled that dragoon for like 30 seconds. Like maybe you can do hard mode.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be
I
pretty
did
ideal. Yeah.
Yeah, I did eventually go through the whole game in hard mode, which was a challenge for me, but it was a challenge that felt like really good. Like I eventually, even in that first DLC they released too, I completed that on hard as well. Felt pretty satisfying, and satisfying even coming from 14, since there's a lot of Easter eggs in there for sure.
Yeah. Do you think maybe I'm a proponent of they should give as many all the difficulty options to be available from the beginning, except like for a super secret difficult one. Like it's always
Yeah.
fun to have like a super secret one, but some the base harder difficulty should be available from the beginning.
What
16
about
and
dynamic?
I was gonna say 16 Rebirth did not do this.
Hmm.
Hard mode was locked out, but there's a specific reason why hard mode is usually locked out because it's not intended to be played that way. It's a specific way. But the thing I want to point out in the question to you is both 16 and Rebirth have trophies tied to difficulty. And do you think that's a problem with maybe restricting the accessibility of the difficulty options from the get-go because they want you to work towards these trophies? Would you be okay with them ditching difficulty based trophies in a favor of if that meant opening up the difficulties right from the get go and being able to change difficulties in the middle of the game? Because you cannot do that in some of these games. Like in 6 and 17, when you're in a chapter, you're on that difficulty unless you restart the chapter. But would you prefer it if they allowed you to be able to freely change difficulties on the fly?
Yeah, I think in general, giving more people options to customize the way that they want to play, and being able to freely move it up or down, I think is a good thing. With Seven Rebirth, for example, there are some curdles with hard mode that are different, than the normal mode. That really make you want to. It's a different mindset. Whereas in 16 hard mode, it's more about your execution in the moment. Whereas in hard mode, in let's say, I'll just say Final Fantasy VII Remake to provide, non-spoilery context for hard mode, is that in 7 Remake hard mode, you really had to think a lot more about how you're managing your resources, your MP. And that's not something you really have to do with 16.
Yeah, like your materia build as well was very important in remakes hard
Mhm.
mode. I will
Yeah,
say the other factor that why the a design choice they made, why you probably couldn't do either of these from the get go. Both games have leveling, and hard mode in Remake Rebirth and Final Fantasy mode in 16 expect you to be at a certain level before you engage. Now, obviously, they could just like do a level skip, but that's part of the progression. They want you to be at X level before you start challenging this stuff. And so it was kind of designed that way for both of them. And I wonder if that's something they need to maybe like consider moving away from, or having a solution where if you jump into it, it just gives you a character that's at the appropriate level. You start at those levels. Obviously, the fear is like, well, can they take that character and save data back into normal and cheese it? It's like, no,
yeah,
just say like, just lock it out. Just be like, if you start on hard mode, then you can lower the difficulty, but you will be like you will like you'll be your level will be reset down to this or something like that. I don't know, like some solution that basically prevents you from doing that. I don't know. Do
yeah. Yeah, and it's tough. Like in the context of our conversation about 14 as well, it's just it really kind of depends on the game and what makes sense for how you progress through it. I mean, again, being able to lower and raise the difficulty, I think in any situation where you can is a good idea, provided obviously they're thought through and that you're not just like adjusting base things like I mean that's part of it, like HP and strength and so on. Um, but I think for looking at 16 and 7 remake rebirth, the hard mode difficulties of them really depend on what kind of game it is, what the player is expected to do, because definitely in rebirth and remake, your loadout, your kit is really important to your success. If you do not have certain things, you will have a bad time.
Mhm.
Whereas 16, a lot of your kit is pretty freely available, and even depending on what icon you select, depending on how you perform, definitely is what is going to carry you through based on which one you pick.
Yeah, I will say like about how much I followed like 16. Like there is a pretty good meta set of icon abilities that pretty much if you want to just like not you still have to execute. That's like the difficulty is like the execution
Yeah,
and dealing with mechanics.
yeah.
But
I get there's a meta,
yeah,
but
like
ultimately I didn't get any roadblocks doing the DLC hard modes.
yeah, but I think you don't even like I say, you don't really even need that. Like it just makes it even easier if you want to
Yeah,
like have that. Like I did, so I want to point out like the Echoes of the Fallen first DLC. That you're like looking for a sign that of difficulty bump. Everything in that was more challenging than anything in base game. The final boss and like all the mini bosses leading up to it, way more challenging than anything in that I saw. This was like the final, even on like story version, the final boss, like, oh man, look at all these mechanics going on. So I expect kind of more of that in the Rising Tide. It's so I was pleasantly surprised by that, but it was definitely just winging it with what I'd been using before. Made that last fight on even story mode a little bit more like definitely felt very good, like a good level of challenge. When I tried it again with like the meta build, I was like, oh gosh, I forgot about all this. Like I was reminded, like I need to use these. Kind of like also, but I also knew the mechanics. I kind of like had no problem. But on the Final Fantasy mode version of it, also really didn't have a problem with it either because of like that. You just do so much
yeah,
damage with that. But yeah, to your question about where they're going to go with 16, I think I do expect the Rising Tide to mimic Echoes of the Fallen in terms of like bosses just being way more complex with their mechanics. And it's like what we were talking about 14, throwing more stuff at you to be more on your feet and like overlapping things. So it's like, oh, you're gonna probably gonna get hit by more things, and like you're gonna like it's gonna punish you a little bit more.
yeah. I think there's definitely there are definitely lessons from 16 as well that they can carry into 14 and vice versa for whatever their upcoming projects are. And it's funny with 16 is I was actually pushed into something against my knowing my will. So I did the base game, and you probably already know what I'm going to talk about. Is I did the base game on the standard difficulty, and then so I'm habitually a one save slot person. So I did the standard, and then I did Final Fantasy mode. Got to the end of Final Fantasy mode, and I'm like, all right, I'm ready for this DLC. Oh, I've got to start it on Final Fantasy mode. So, but I was actually surprised though with how I mean Final Fantasy 16, of course, a long game, but it really did kind of build the skills to really kind of approach the DLC even on hard mode. And so it was actually really thrilling to do all those fights, especially the DPS check at the last boss.
Oh yeah.
It was thrilling, and so I had a really good time with that. But I was surprised with the kit that the game gives you, that I was able to actually get into it so quick. I thought I was going to struggle and fail, but I actually did it live on stream, and surprisingly, I did not beat my head against it. So sometimes people can rise to the challenge, but I do believe that giving people the choice to kind of feel out where they want to go or how they want to do it is the best.
Yeah, I agree. I'm always on that side of the fence, and I'll be the blasphemous person here and say I even think this should apply to FromSoft games. I know people like it's their artistic vision, and like that's what they want to do. I get that's great, but like the when people mod PC versions to like reduce the challenge on some of those games, like the Dark Souls games, I'm not surprised at all about that. Obviously, the most recent one, Elden Ring, kind of had a built-in easy mode with your mimic tier.
Yeah,
But
for those
that
games
really
especially.
that really makes some of it that easy. I mean, it made it easier, I
Yeah.
guess. But I mean, when you get your ass handed to you by Millennia for like the 100th time, did you really feel it was easy mode?
Yeah,
Nope.
yeah. Yeah, and the vision for those games, I totally get it. And there are ways within the infrastructure of Elden Ring and other Souls games to to do easy mode, right? Like it may not say easy mode, but like you are doing things, you are
Yeah.
leveling a certain way, you are blah blah blah. Um, but there are definitely people that I do know that on the face of it will not try those games, although they're like, I really want to experience that world. I really want to experience the writing, the level design, this that, but it's just like I can't, for many different, and some of them are very good reasons, I can't engage with those games because of the the wall that's in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Very
if
true.
those games eventually did it, that I would be supportive of that. But if they want to keep going the way that they're going, that's fine too. I get it.
Yeah, I even think like maybe including like a message like I love it. Like Heber loves this too, and I like it now because he pointed out games, more and more games that have the difficulty options, and they give a description of what's being changed, and when they in that description when they include this is the developer intended difficulty, or they intend you to play this on the first playthrough at this difficulty. He loves when they say that type of stuff, and I actually appreciate that. I also love it when like I'm all for like the options because like was it Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown? There's 4 preset difficulties, and then in any of them you can go in and move around sliders for every single like thing,
Yeah,
and it's like
yeah.
that's perfect. Like find like you can choose presets, or if like man this one's too easy but this one's too hard. I wish there's something in between, but you don't have a preset. It's like well then adjust a few things in there. Like what are you finding too easy? What are you finding too hard? Like adjust that. For me, like I'm terrible with like parry windows. Like traditionally parry windows in a lot of games are just like so tight that I don't like I usually think it's like blind luck when I'm pulling them off. So like in Prince of Persia, I set it to max, like the parry window max. I was like, give me the longest time, but everything else, like leave everything else alone. Like I like this
Mhm.
like harder difficulty, but give me a larger parry window, please. And I was like,
Yeah,
perfect. Like that's great. So anything like that would be like really
yeah.
nice. I did see, was it Azet in chat was bringing up a hardcore Bozia where they said like drop 0 metal on death, rank down, blah blah. What if they just did like a traditional hardcore mode? Because you seeing that rise in popularity where it's like one life, that's it, you die, you're done. Now obviously Deep Dungeon is that, but what if they extended that to other pieces of like challenging content, like a mode where you got like better rewards? So like you like the Bozia challenge. You'll go in there with a character at basic at starting progression, and you gotta hit the end. But if you die once, it's over. You go back to the start. You got to start a whole new progression. Or like I think I've mentioned this before, like, boss gauntlets. Like you must complete like all the EX, like the Endwalker EX trials, all back to back to back. Anyone who dies, they're out. Like, nope, they can't be revived. They're just like gone. And like, can you make that? And like, like doing like an ultimate version, like here are the old, like, and it's in like the duty finder. You just check this box. I would like to do the gauntlet challenge. Like, I don't know. There's just like this fun, crazy, like it's going back to modifiers. This is all just like modifiers that give you new ways to make things challenging. But again, it all comes back to the rewards. Is
Yeah.
there something they could do that will give you a good enough reward? Like, so your idea of like a hardcore Bozia, that's cool, but what's the reward other than like, I did it? Like some people, that's enough. For others, they need something a little bit more incentive for sure.
I really think that's going to be the key thing to watch for Final Fantasy XIV moving forward is, again, they've got the building blocks, but how can you configure them in exciting ways for the community, and at different skill and interest levels. And so, yeah, with Bozia, the next iteration of that we're likely to see, hopefully, it may not be as much content potentially as we've talked about before. Did they commit to doing Bozia in as many zones, as many dungeons, and so on? I think the key to success here is to really to configure these in interesting ways that react with the community's desire.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
you can't please everyone, and that's just a
Very.
fact of everything. And I think people would really do well to remember that, like, a lot of people engage Final Fantasy XIV in different ways, and I think a lot of people too get a little bit too concerned about, like, you need to design the game in such way that gives me the more types of player skill people that I want to play with. It just that is a very difficult request to fulfill.
Yep. I
But I
feel like,
think
yeah,
giving a wide variety of objectives, changing the objectives, having some fun with different types of objectives, I think that will bring a lot of people some joy. It'll spark
very,
joy in some cases. Yeah.
very good points. Yeah. I also try and stress that as much as I can on my own like personal streams that when I share like feedback about how I think things can be improved, I will tell you there's things about improving it for the veterans, aka higher level players for any kind of content, versus how do you improve this for the the betterment of the overall game? Like, do you cater to a smaller group or do you cater to a larger group? And what are the benefits of one or the other? And ultimately, with this type of game, you can't please everyone, so like you got to go for like the widest net. You got to try and please the people who are feeding in the new players because don't want to restrict that. You don't want to make that any more difficult because the larger the player pool is, there's more of a chance those people start going up different ladders into like higher levels of content and they filter into that. You don't want to place that filter right at the bottom and like, all right, we're not getting as many players in, and there's a chance some of them are, because it's catering more to this type of content, there's a chance they're going to be more like this, but you're like really like, you're really hamstringing yourself there.
Yeah.
I think that's not generally the best approach, and if you listen to anything the devs say, like that's kind of like their mentality as well.
Yeah.
So
But
just
look,
being, yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
I mean, and you can probably talk to this better than I have, but like the revitalization of PvP, maybe they did it through, simplifying things as at the base. Maybe they did it through introducing a seasonal ticket that you fill out. Like, either way, you are getting people into the system for better or worse. The people who get into that PvP, they will kind of fill out some of the. Even right now, I've been surprised. Like, so PvP has had its own kind of resurgence, or increase. I don't want to sound mean, but like it's. I've played more PvP than I in the last expansion than I have in my entire career with Final Fantasy XIV, and I think that's really, it's two things. It's the reward system making a bit more sense, and providing me an incentive to do it more often and build experience in that mode. And the other thing is really just thinking of a new and fresh way. I know people's mileage may vary with different modes of PvP, but CC for me was like the thing that brought me back to PvP. I got into CCC and I started doing frontlines more often. Yes, part of it is for rewards, but I do more PvP now than I ever have. And I've also been noticing more events with the fishing community. I've seen Fish Fest take off. That's really cool. And the more objectives and the more things that they can do to reinforce and build other communities within FF14 that aren't just the raiding community, I think the more meat will stick to the bone when it comes to retention and so on. I think it is in their best interest to build a wide variety of interest in the many different types of content there is.
I agree. And really good to hear you say that it was working as intended. Was especially the PvP. I'm not taking the bait. We'll be here for many more hours, and we
Mhm.
already had an episode where we kind of talked a little bit about it. But on the surface level, yes, it achieved its objective, and I think that's what they were going for, to increase the amount of participation by these new like rewards, new modes, new structures, just to lower the barrier, and applying that to other types of content in this game. You could see that type of payoff as well, if they were to do that, and for ones they have already done that for. So I do think that's a very good design approach. It's the follow through and the support after that.
Yeah.
We can get into the discussion about that, and we have for this whole episode for several of these things. I want to talk about one last thing before we wrap up here, just because it was a headline, and to me, it's a biggie, and that is the announcement of the upcoming test of cross-region data center travel. This is something that people have been like thinking, hoping would be coming. I was the one who asked the question at the North American Fan Fest about when this, where is this? Is this coming? Is it possible? Along with like cross data center duty finder, which is not in this at all, and there have been no update on that since. But starting on Sunday, March 24th at 8 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, whatever that is in your local time zone, they are going to do, and this is going to run until maintenance begins for Dawn Trail. So this is going to last for several months. We are getting basically essentially a stress test where all of where the Japanese data centers, North American data centers, European data centers, all three of us can send our characters to visit Oceania. They are not letting us cross-pollinate with each other, but we all can go to Oceania because there's just the lowest, probably because they need people to go there. There's a lot of other reasons. They're worried about like cultural differences. There's a whole myriad factors that they want to sort out and get more data, and that is why they're doing this. But it's hard to not see this and think this is a preamble to some point in the next expansion getting proper cross-region data center traveling. And the consequences of this, and the both good and bad, because we've seen what has happened with cross-world and cross-data center visiting within each region, like the effects of that. And I will say, as being pointed out in chat, like EU side, but on the NA side, how it's affected, like even like Party Finder. Like everyone has to go to Aether now for like Party Finder stuff because all the other data centers on NA just don't have as much activity. Who knows if that's true? But
Mhm.
I'm freaking excited for this. Like I've been waiting for this because I'm tired of making alts that have to, like, because you're restricted. Each data center you can have like your characters locked there. Then they allow you to visit. Now it's like that's great, but I still can't go to JP or EU with my character. I have to make a new character to progress through that, and it's like it just sits there. Like this is a game where you have pride in your character and your achievements and your gear and everything. It's like I want to be able to like go over there and show that off and like participate and earn progress with that character. Are you excited about this, Tony? Like, what are your like feelings about this, or you just see this as like cool? I don't know. I don't know how excited you are for
Yeah,
this.
yeah. It's interesting to me. I don't do really any travel, too much travel myself. I do stay within like for the purposes of hunt trains that the community conducts. I'll usually stay within Primal. Um, but I think in the long term, this is fulfilling a long term vision for what Yoshida has, and taking into account some of the other things that we've talked about earlier on this podcast about having the community together as soon as together as possible. And this is like the final step towards that, is to be able to have people within different regions of the world being able to play the same game together. I think on the surface level that is admirable, and as much like physical barriers have to come down, that it's a good thing. Obviously there are some drawbacks, and as we've a lot of us have seen, there is a stratification of people who play a certain way going to one data center or one world and so on. That is a legitimate drawback, and I think that if there is a way for them to build better tools to allow people to communicate in ways that ultimately we want to be connected with each other. There are barriers in Final Fantasy XIV that have prevented us from doing that. And I think if you have to build some sort of like DC level or world, DC level like party finder, as crazy as that sounds, like ultimately you want to enable people to play together. There's concern about how one DC or one region has a bigger community for something. It's just going to happen here, and I think that the ways they're going to really have to think about ways they can ease that process to avoid situations where, like, you pick the wrong data center, you pick the wrong world, you pick the wrong this that, because we've seen that happen in the past. Even Primal, like, and this is way back in the day, but I remember, like, oh, if you wanted to be serious about rating, you would go to Gilgamesh or something like that. You would have
Mm.
to pay to get off of Primal and go somewhere else. And it's like, if the barrier is gone, though, you know, I see that as less of an issue. Um, Another important factor in this, and I'm sure we'll talk about it too, is for Endwalker. As we all well know, we had a little bit of issues logging on, and I was lucky enough where I took the week off from work, which obviously for a lot of online, and this is a similar story for Diablo, for other games, but it's like it's not usually a wise thing. I was lucky though, because I can also be an early bird, and I was able to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and get on, and I was fine mostly through the entire day. Yes, it was exhausting playing for 14 hours a day, but here's the thing, is like this is also going to be a good idea for Dawn Trail coming up, in addition to what I hope the digital servers will fulfill, as well as being able to get into the game faster. I did see a real funny meme going around, maybe you've seen this too, about related to PvP, and one Goku and Vegeta telling each other to find somewhere to fight empty
Yep.
and pointing to the Oceania server.
Yep.
um, which is funny, but if it really does help stabilize these high traffic events, because from what I see is like, there's going to be a lot of interest in the game when Dawn Trail goes live, especially people who've been away from the game, that want to see how their character looks with the new graphics. It could be as simple as that. There's going to be new interest in the game. And so if me being able to go to Oceania and play during off peak, if that is what helps me play the game and not have to sit in a queue for 6 to 8 hours, that's great. That'll be an improvement until things normalize.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I do. Yeah, I didn't think it'll be like a 1-2 combination, like using the cloud servers to help alleviate the stress of
I
like the
mean,
launch week, as you said, to
if you
try and
remember,
remedy that.
yeah, they halted sales for the game for over a month, and I'm sure Yoshida, like, was probably crying in the break room or something. Like, I'm sure he did not want to do that, but if they can prevent that this time, like, you know,
Yeah, I definitely think that that's what all this is leading towards, is that they're trying to mitigate that launch window as much as possible to ensure people don't suffer excruciating long wait times, and that they can continue to sell the game, add new accounts, and keep pace with the growth, so that they don't stymie it at all. So yeah, I do like the cloud servers. I think will be there for launch. And then yeah, like if this, I don't think this will be available at launch. But in the future, it would be nice if this was a cross region data center travel was available for maybe like okay, yeah, one region is a little less crowded right now. Maybe like it gives you estimated wait times, and maybe this even encourages you like, hey, your data center right now is a little congested. Would you mind going over here? Like your character and everything will still have progression and everything like that.
Mhm.
I do think there are other considerations that need to be hammered out that I think these is great that this functionality exists, and they've even said it's like existed. It's just like they have like concerns about like the game economy being impacted by this. We've talked about like social norms, and like just general activity, but like the other considerations I think are just as important, is the functionality of Party Finder and Duty Finder. And as well as like things like retainers and gathering crafting, like gathering nodes being restricted, retainers being restricted, certain like FC functions. There needs to be a way where you can still utilize that stuff. It's most importantly, I think the top level is the number one thing. I think it's even bigger priority than this. This I think they're doing because it exists. It's something they have. They can try it out. But they said in the North American Fan Fest that they don't. While they would like to do it, the functionality is not there yet. Cross data center duty finder, so that we could pool all the players in each region, so that when you're queuing up for an instance, you're not just queuing with like Primal, Aether, Dynamis, or Crystal. It's like no, you're all queuing as NA. So I might get this dungeon with someone in Aether or someone from Crystal. I don't have to go over there and visit them. I can queue from anywhere and I can get matched with them in all types of instant content. I think that is like, honestly, that's the number one thing I most want to see happen more than this, honestly, is
Mhm.
that along with the cross data center party finder. I do think they should start regional, obviously, especially Party Finder. If they do Party Finder, like those should stay regional for the time being. But the this would help a lot of types of content, because there are people who queue for certain types of content that don't necessarily, the queue won't pop, because while there might be a total amount of players who could make that instance happen, they're all segregated into different like data centers and they're not queuing together. So this, like for example, like Rival Wings, another PvP mode, that doesn't pop outside of like the current events going on or community led events to make those happen. But if you were to pool everyone together, I would say it would probably like have a better chance of happening. But even like I mean, this is a little PvP specific, but like just filtering people in so that modes stay active and you increase the player base, and so that maybe the window of like prime time expands. So, like even just like regionally in North America, it's like, oh, all the West Coast players, like maybe all the East Coast and like Central Time people are now asleep. I still want to play, and there's a lot of people on the West Coast in the US, but it's like, man, it's harder to get some queues popping around this time. Everything dies off. It's like,
Mhm.
well, if you don't have to worry about what data center you're on, it increases the chance to like, oh, there are more people queuing and being filtered together. It might pop a little bit longer. So now instead of like 1 a.m. Pacific, everything dies off. It's like, no, it goes to like 2 or 3 a.m. And it expands. And then when you add the world, and it's like, oh, if we ever get cross world data center, duty finder and party finder, then like that's all she wrote. Like the game will be
Yeah.
active 24/7 every day. Like
Mhm.
that's the real dream right there. It's like, yo, you can play whenever you want to play, man. Let's go.
Yeah.
But
I,
they don't have that functionality yet, unfortunately, they said.
Yeah, ideally, this is probably the closest that they will get to fulfilling that goal of theirs. I don't think it's necessarily a stated goal, but it seems like they want to get as many people playing together and communicating together as they can, because it is a positive thing for the health, long term health of the game. And chat brings up, obviously some downsides to that is, playing Ninja on a JP server if you're logging in from the
Yeah.
logging in from North America presents some challenges. But if that's the difference, if playing suboptimally or not at all is the choice, then I think depending on what you're doing, I think you'll want to play.
Yeah, I think as long as it's communicated to the player, it's understood. Like if we get this functionality at some point, it's like, hey, you will be playing in a server that's further away, so you're gonna have higher ping. Are you like just even making you aware of it? It's like just know if you want to play at this hour, you're gonna have to, and you want this to be active, you're gonna have to play on this server, and you're just gonna have to deal with this, or you can wait and play on a server closer to you. As long as this is communicated and understood. But again, that yeah, I would rather I'd rather have that option because a lot of people are willing to deal with that. Like that's fine. Like I just want to play. I just want to be things to be active. And then obviously for certain types of like, precise content, that might not be the best way to do it. But as the community has shown is very resilient, they can handle a lot of these challenges thrown at them. They're willing to deal with that. And hopefully, even within like our region, like we've had complaints about how all the NA data centers are on West Coast. Like we said, the cloud servers are going to be obviously used to alleviate stress at content updates, specifically expansion launches, but there's a chance they might just put out cloud servers in general for like, hey, East Coast players, you want to deal with like a cloud server and maybe have a slightly reduced ping? It's an option if you want to you want to connect to
Mhm.
these. It's like something if you really are struggling with higher level play, connecting to West Coast servers. I could see that being an option provided as well. Obviously, I don't think there's a way that from my understanding of networking that worldwide that would alleviate any I don't think there's a way for JP players to connect to a local server, us to connect to a local server, and then those servers communicate with each other. So like we're seeing things like, oh, our rotations are fine, their rotations are fine, but like the back end talking, like I don't know if that's possible. But I think no matter what, just because of like the logistics of how fast data can move and physical distances, there's always going to be,
Yeah.
if you're connecting far enough away, there's always going to be that delay. Unfortunately, like we have not solved the problem of traversing physical spaces faster than a certain
Mhm.
threshold. Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah, but it's all really interesting to see how far the game has come as far as connecting people. First off, it's like you basically needed to start in the same world, or otherwise you couldn't communicate with anyone. But then that's been slowly built up, and so on and so forth. Ultimately, I think, and this is going to be something to watch as time goes forward. These these servers, and I assume they are renting them from another company. Um, Obviously, that sounds like a very temporary basis. So I think it'll be good if that is something that can provide some relief for the launch situation, which I predict and suspect will be quite busy. Um, so I had a friend who I believe thinks they are very close to wherever the rented servers are.
Oh,
So they were like, this is a different experience. But hopefully, as time goes on, I just can't imagine how. I mean, they must have been planning from day one, seeing how things went with the Endwalker launch. Like number one, we've got to make sure that we do everything that we can to prevent what happened there. To avoid frustrating our community and to avoid stopping sales of our critically acclaimed MMORPG. Um, so I think that is definitely a consideration to kind of loop back around to something we talked about very early on is, if there is a new MMO that this team would like to do in the future, I definitely think that that is something that they will definitely consider from the ground up is getting as many people together in the least frustrating way possible.
yeah. I would be very excited to see what they have planned for a new one because, yeah, just starting from there, like, just structurally, infrastructure from the ground up. I'm sure, like, Yoshida would, like, I'm assuming he would, like, love that. Like, yes, all the lessons we've learned from 14 and our past, work on MMOs, and the technology available now, we're doing this. We're investing in this from the start, and we're gonna have that. How much of a better just end user experience is going to be from like playability for that and connectivity? I
Yeah.
would be like just starting there. Forget like all like the content ideas as well. Like I mean, sure they got plenty of that, but and no more, no more trying to like fall back on the copium arguments of spaghetti code is the reason this game is bad or not working like or the way it was,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that. not
I
won't
mean,
have to deal with that anymore. People.
a lot of people do forget, like looking at A Realm Reborn, that an MMO came together in 18 months from Square Enix. It is every bit as the Hail Mary as it is cracked up to be. And so, yes, in doing a Hail Mary, there are some structural problems that persist to this day. Let's maybe not talk about the class job system. Um, but yeah, I think that in keeping this MMO operating for over 10 years, I am sure that there are definitely things that Yoshida and the team are like, if we just could start fresh with like a new project, that would be the number one thing that we would try to resolve for our players. Or maybe a housing system that is built differently from the ground up. um, I can't imagine the amount of what I suspect with that is like they are not able to un-F that system basically, and so they've got to proceed because redoing that would probably have a lot of time and expense and a lot of knowledge that may not exist. People don't, especially in the industry as we're learning. They move between different projects a lot, and you know I'm sure that the team that exists on 14 now, and as we know, there are a lot of people that have come in from the writing team, from the art teams. Like, there's a lot of different people on the game now too.
Yeah, yeah, very. Yeah, do wonder if what they'll be working on going forward because they've there have been some statements from Naoki Yoshida. In fact, people have started to pick up on that. His hypothetical statements end up being truthful statements when he's talking about the future content and/or project ideas. So I feel like he
If
might have to get
anything,
a little bit more clever with his disguising of
yeah,
foreshadowing.
yeah, I think for those of us who have like listened to Yoshida talk during live letters, he does talk a lot about like what he would like to do with the game, or what he will state things that he will straight up say like this is not something that FF14 can do. He'll do like the Yoshida like the throwing his head back, like, because he knows like
Yeah,
unfortunately, like, he understands the request and like why people want that, but it's like but from like an engineering or programming perspective, he knows that it may not be possible within a short enough time frame. You probably remember when he would get a little upset about like people ask, hey, can I queue with my chocobo out? It seems so simple, right? So simple, and he
yep,
would just be like, and he would then explain, of course, that like yes, this does take a lot of effort because we have to like reprogram the party system. We have to and so, but even then they did it. It took them a while, but they eventually did it. And so I think that what is reassuring about him and the whole team's efforts, I don't want to just pin it on one guy because obviously this is a team of hundreds of people that are putting their all into it, is like if it's possible, they will try, and I think players should, you know, request what their heart desires, um, because ultimately, they will try to fulfill what they can, within reason. The game's 10 years old. It came together in 15 to 18 months, which to me is still crazy. Um, but yeah, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what the next 10 years of Final Fantasy XIV brings. And I think the key to that will be to take the things that they are able to build with the schedule that Yoshida has expertly built, but then iterating them in ways, changing the rules, maybe not so much making just more. You don't want to just add more of content, but making it interesting for new and old players to connect in new ways and to um, discover new things that they weren't into in the game. For example, for me, PvP, like again, didn't get into it until like post Shadowbringers. Um, but yeah, that's what the next 10 years of this game is going to be like. The face of it may not change, but the way you interact with it may.
well, we I think that's gonna do it for this episode. I'm going to point out that in just a little over, is it a week from now? It is a week from now, a week from yesterday. Sorry. We will be possibly getting some more new information regarding 14 and Dawn Trail specifically. There is a PAX East panel where producer director Naoki Yoshida. I'm going to be looking back at the past 10 years and looking forward at Dawn Trail. It's called Journey to Dawn Trail, the 10-year adventure of Final Fantasy XIV. That is at PAX East. It's at 9 a.m. Pacific time in the morning on that Saturday. So those of us a little further east, a little more reasonable time, don't have to can sleep in a little bit before we have to watch it. That's very nice. I fully expect we are getting. I don't know anything, but I fully expect the release date at this panel for Dawn
Sure.
Trail. I think we get the release date and announcement of when pre-orders will begin. So we got some news upcoming this coming weekend. Hopefully. There's also
I'm pretty sure the FF16 collab is a lock, considering it's coming up pretty quick.
Yep, and they have a 16 panel as well. I believe it's on Friday. So yeah, the CBU3 will be at PAX East doing some talks there. So look forward to that. Before we sign off here, Tony, can you let our listeners and viewers know where they could follow you if you want to check out more of your stuff, and if there's anything you're working on you want to give a shout out to?
Sure. So you can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky at Tony Garsow. You can find my work over at novacrystallis.com. We do news, we do reviews, we do previews, we do a lot of updates for all Square Enix franchises and properties. And so if you want to check that out, we would be happy to have you take a look at our content. I'll probably be streaming more Final Fantasy VII Rebirth hard mode tonight, so look forward to that. Look forward to me, maybe swearing off camera to some of these harder fights. Speaking of difficulty. But yeah, you can find our work there. Our team would love to have you check out our Final Fantasy VII Rebirth review. Props to Quentin O'Connor for writing that, and I edited it. So check it out.
Very nice. Well, as usual, thank you, chat, for your participation and engagement for this episode. Thank you to all the listeners and viewers who are supporting the show. Thank you, Tony, for joining me. Again, we do the show on the weekend, so I know it's valuable weekend time. So thank you for taking time out of your day to chat. But this is probably our longest episode now, but I actually didn't feel like that. As you see, we could talk about anything Final Fantasy for days.
Thank you.
Show.
Thank you for letting us talk about Final Fantasy XIV for a very long time. I love doing it, and clearly Damiani, you get a kick out of it too. So I think chat's also excited as well.
Yeah, I just realized we talk about other stuff besides Final Fantasy, but if I want to make this Final Fantasy specific, I should have copyrighted this, but I'm giving all of you a free gift. If you want to make a Final Fantasy specific podcast, it's called Final Fantasy for Days. There you go.
There you go.
If you're looking for a new Final Fantasy podcast or show, there's your title right there if you're only going to talk about. But yes, thank you, everyone. And hopefully we'll be back next weekend. I got to figure out a topic. As we said, there's news dropping, but that might be a little too close, too soon, because getting a guest, I don't like doing that quick turnaround. I like giving our guests a little bit of a lead time. But I will take a look into some of the topics that have sprung up in the recent days and in the next day or two, and we'll try and get that locked down. But yeah, as usual, hopefully we'll see you next week. So until next time, thank you for watching, and have a great week, everyone.
Happy St. Pat's.